Hello everyone, I'm the Dream Teller and I'm here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching? Now get comfortable and relax. It started on a Tuesday night, close to midnight. I was sitting in my living room staring at the TV, feeling bored and a bit restless. I remember the sound of the knocking on my front door. It was 3 knocks. Not too loud, not too soft, just clear and direct. I got up right away, walked to the door and looked through the peephole. There was nobody there. I opened the door and looked outside. The porch light was on and I could see my front yard and the empty street. There was nothing unusual. I stood there a few seconds, stepped out to check around, but I didn't see anything. I went back inside, locked the door and sat down. I told myself it was probably some random noise. The next night, around the same time, I heard the knocking again. 3 knocks, very similar. I paused the movie I was watching and rushed to the door. I checked through the peephole first. No one. I opened the door and looked out. Same situation. Porch light on, street empty, no movement, no sounds, just stillness. I felt confused. I wasn't scared yet. I was just annoyed and a bit puzzled. I thought maybe it was some prank. I stood outside for a while, hoping to catch someone hiding behind a bush or a car, but I didn't see anyone. The air felt heavy, but that was just my nerves. I went back inside and locked up. The 3rd night, I was ready. I stayed in the hallway near the front door, waiting, watching the time. It was just before midnight when I heard the knocks again. 3 knocks, same pattern. I threw the door open immediately. The outside light was on. Nothing moved. I tried to catch someone running away, but there was no one there. I stepped out and looked left and right. Nobody on the sidewalk, nobody in the yard, nobody in the street. The houses around me were quiet and dark. I listened carefully. Nothing. I walked around the front of my house, looked at the sides. Just grass and the neighbor's fence. No footprints, no broken branches, nothing out of place. I felt something inside my stomach twist a little. My chest felt tight. I realized this wasn't normal, but I tried to stay calm. I went back inside and locked the door. I didn't sleep well that night. I kept waking up, checking the door, looking out the window. No more knocks came. On the 4th night, it happened again. 3 knocks, right before midnight. By this time, I was feeling more tense. My breathing got faster when I heard it. My palms felt sweaty. I was getting irritated and a little bit scared. I rushed to the door again, checked the peephole, opened it. Again, not a single sign of anyone. The street was empty. The houses were quiet. I stood outside and said, "Who's there?" I said it in a normal voice at first, then louder. I felt stupid talking to the empty air. No one answered. A breeze came by, and I felt cold. I went back in, heart beating hard, and locked up. I thought about calling the police, but what would I say? Someone knocks and disappears every night? It sounded ridiculous. Besides, no one threatened me, no one broke anything. It was just knocking. After a week of this, I decided I needed proof. If I could record someone doing it, I could show it to the cops, or at least figure out who was messing with me. I bought a small camera that connected to my Wi-Fi and had night vision. I installed it above my door, facing the entrance, and made sure it covered a good portion of the front yard and the walkway. I tested it during the day. The image was clear. I could see everything. I synced it with my phone so I could watch live if I wanted. I thought this was going to solve everything. That night, I sat in my living room with my phone in hand. A few minutes before midnight, I turned the TV off. I listened closely. My heartbeat was steady. I was determined to catch whoever it was. Right on schedule, 3 knocks. I jumped up and opened the app. The feed was there, but it looked strange. The image seemed a bit distorted. I could see my porch light and part of the walkway, but the rest looked fuzzy. The connection was strong, so that wasn't normal. I ran to the door and opened it. No one was there. I checked the camera's live feed again. The distortion was worse. It looked like static, a kind of interference. After a few seconds, the image stabilized. The walkway looked empty. I replayed the footage and saw something weird. Right before the knocks, there was a dark shape moving toward my door. It looked like a faint shadow, hard to define. As soon as this shape got close, the video started to glitch. Then, after a moment, the shape was gone, and the image was clear again. I watched this replay over and over, trying to make sense of it. My eyes got tired from staring at the screen. I felt my neck tense up and my head started to hurt. I didn't understand what I was seeing. It didn't look like a person. It looked like a vague outline, like a shadow that wasn't attached to anything. I know I'm not supposed to use any weird descriptions, but I can't find a better way to say it. It was just a dark shape, unclear and hard to describe, moving in a straight line toward my door. There was no detail, no face, no clothing, just darkness. And once it reached my door, the camera went crazy, like it couldn't focus or couldn't process what it was seeing. The next night, I positioned myself near the front window. I turned off all the lights inside, hoping to see something outside before it knocked. I placed my phone on the coffee table with the live feed open, so I could check both outside with my eyes and on the screen. I waited. My breathing was shallow. My hands were shaky. I felt my heart pounding in my chest as it got close to midnight. When I heard the first knock, I tried to look through the window quietly, but I didn't see anything. It was just the front yard and the light shining down. I checked my phone, and again the camera feed was messed up. The static and distortion were there like last time. I tried to open the door fast, but again, nothing outside. The night was silent, the street empty. I felt a strong urge to leave my house and not come back. I didn't know what I was dealing with. My stomach felt sick, my mouth was dry. I paced around the living room, trying to calm down. I told myself I would try a different approach. The knocking always happened at the same time, always 3 knocks. Whatever it was, it didn't cause physical damage. It just knocked. I tried to imagine it was some sort of weird mechanical glitch, something with the pipes or the door frame. But the camera footage showed otherwise. There was something approaching, something that made the camera malfunction. The night after that, I decided to stay awake outside, in my car, parked across the street. I wanted to see my house from a distance. If someone came to my door, I could see them. I left all the lights on inside the house. I set the camera to record. I sat in my car, engine off, windows slightly cracked for air. It was dark and quiet. I could see my front door clearly. Around midnight, I heard the knocks, but I heard them faintly because I was in the car. I focused on the door. I didn't see anyone standing there. I saw the light on my porch, the doorway, the walkway. It all looked normal. Yet, I heard 3 knocks. Clear as day, even from where I sat. No one was there. I felt sweat on my forehead. My back felt cold against the car seat. My heart beat faster. I turned my phone on and checked the camera. Again, the camera feed was static and fuzzy at the knocking moment. I felt a wave of panic in my chest. I got out of the car and walked slowly to my house. My legs felt weak, like they might give out at any second. My hands were shaking. I opened the door and looked around my living room. Everything was the way I left it. I went to the camera's recorded footage and watched it. Same thing. A dark shape moved toward my door. The image went crazy, then cleared up, and the shape was gone. There were no footsteps, no sound other than the knocks. It was always 3 knocks. The shape had no clear form. It just moved in a straight line and vanished. I decided to call the police the next day. I told them someone was knocking at my door late at night and running away. They sent a patrol car after dark. 2 officers stayed in their car at the end of the block watching my house. They kept radio contact with me. The time came, I heard the knocks again. I called them right away. They said they saw nothing. No one approached my house. They got out of their car and walked around. They found nothing. When I reviewed the camera footage, I saw the same shape again, the same distortion. I told the cops about the video. They looked at it on my phone, shrugged, and said it must be some glare or a camera malfunction. They seemed frustrated that I was calling them for nothing concrete. I could see they were annoyed. I didn't blame them. I had no explanation. That night after they left, I felt more alone. I had no help. I considered staying at a friend's place, but I didn't want to explain this to anyone. It sounded crazy. I tried to come up with a plan. I thought about turning off the porch light to see if that changed anything. I thought about placing more than one camera, so I went and bought 2 extra cameras the next morning. I installed one on the side of my house, covering the walkway from a different angle, and one inside the front window pointing out. I tested them all day, and they worked perfectly. The images were clear and stable, no issues. When night came, I turned off the porch light and relied only on the camera's night vision. I sat in my living room with a baseball bat in my hands. I don't know what I planned to do with it, but holding it made me feel a bit safer. My throat was dry, and I felt a slight headache creeping in. The time passed slowly. The house was quiet. Then, close to midnight, I heard the knocks. 3 knocks, the same pattern, but this time the sound was softer. I checked the cameras live. All 3 showed static and distortion. I couldn't see anything clearly. I got up, opened the door fast, and stepped outside. I swung the bat in the air, expecting someone to be there. Nothing. No one. Just the quiet street. I felt the cool air on my skin. I didn't see anything move, just stillness. I went back inside and locked the door. I checked the recorded footage from all 3 cameras. Each camera showed the same thing, a dark shape approaching, the image going bad, and then the shape was gone. From the side angle, I noticed that the shape had no height I could measure. It just moved in a straight line. From the front window angle, I saw the distortion start before the shape was fully visible, like the camera sensed it before it came into view. The inside camera just showed static and then cleared up. None of the cameras showed a person. No face, no body, no clothing, nothing recognizable. I tried cleaning the cameras, resetting them, changing their positions. Every night, the same knocking, the same distortion. I started to feel weaker every time it happened. My chest felt tight and I had trouble sleeping. During the day, I was jumpy and alert, checking the windows and doors for anything strange. At night, I felt dread build up in my stomach as midnight approached. I drank water, paced around, tried to calm myself. The knocks always came 3 times. I considered leaving my house for good, but it was my home, and I didn't want to run away without understanding what was happening. One night, I decided not to open the door at all. I sat in the dark and listened. The knocks came. I stayed still, holding my breath. My heart pounded. I watched the camera feeds on my phone. All 3 showed the same static. I didn't open the door. After a few seconds, the knocking stopped. The static ended. The shape vanished. It never tried to break in. It never tried to open the door. It only knocked. I realized that I had no idea why this was happening, but it seemed to follow a pattern. I tried ignoring it the next night. Same thing. Knocks, static, then gone. Every time at the same hour. Always 3 knocks. After a few days of this, I became numb to it. I still felt fear, but I tried to hide it. I prepared each night by turning off the TV, turning off most lights, and watching the camera feeds. The knocks came. I didn't answer. The shape arrived on the camera feed. Distortion followed, then it left. I never found any physical evidence outside. No footprints, no scratches on the door. No sign that anyone had been there. Now, I don't know how to end this story because it never ended for me. It still happens. Every night. 3 knocks. A dark shape on the camera. A few seconds of static. Then, nothing. I sleep badly, wake up tired, and go to work feeling anxious. I don't have a solution and I don't have proof that would make sense to anyone. I have strange videos and my own memories. The cops don't care. Neighbors don't notice anything. I don't tell friends because I don't want them to think I've lost my mind. I just deal with it. It's been going on for weeks now, and it's always the same. No escalation, no final confrontation. I don't know what it is. I only know that every night, Right before midnight, I hear 3 knocks on my door. And when I check the camera, I see a dark shape that makes the video feed go bad. Then it disappears without a trace. It doesn't matter what I do. It keeps happening. I'm stuck with this routine. I feel tense all the time, and my chest hurts from holding my breath whenever I expect the knocks to come. That's all there is to say. It's happening. I can't stop it, and I can't explain it. That's my story. When I stepped into my building's elevator that evening, I immediately noticed something felt off. There was a man already inside. He stood near the back, facing the doors, not looking at me, not pressing any button. The doors slid shut behind me, and I reached out to select my floor. My hand paused in midair because he hadn't chosen any floor at all. It was strange. People normally pressed something right away, or at least moved. He did nothing. I picked my floor number and waited, feeling a tightness in my chest. The elevator began moving up, and the man stood there, still and silent, as if waiting for something I couldn't see. I tried not to stare at him, but I kept him in my peripheral vision. He wore a dark jacket with the zipper halfway up and dark jeans. His hair was short and neat. I didn't recognize him. His body was still, and he kept his gaze fixed straight ahead. I shifted my weight from one foot to the other. I tried to act normal. I looked at my phone's screen, unlocked it, locked it again, and cleared my throat. He didn't react. The floors went by. The numbers on the small digital panel above the door lit up one by one. I heard the soft hum of the elevator's motor and the slight clank when it passed each level. When we reached my floor, I stepped forward. I didn't look back at him. I just moved through the open doors and into the hallway. After a few steps, I heard a second set of footsteps. They matched my pace. I turned my head slightly and saw him coming out behind me. He was walking about the same speed as me. The hallway on my floor is simple and well lit, just a long corridor with identical doors, cream-colored walls, and a dull gray carpet. My apartment was near the end on the right. He was behind me, about 10 steps back. My heart beat a little faster. I didn't know why he would get off on my floor if he hadn't pressed a button. Maybe he lived here. I tried to stay calm. I kept walking. The hallway was quiet. No one else was around. The only sounds were our footsteps, mine, then his, always in sync. I reached into my pocket, feeling for my keys, making sure I had them ready. I glanced back again. He was still there, walking, keeping the same distance, not looking at any door, not slowing down. I didn't say anything. I just wanted to reach my door and lock it behind me. When I got to my apartment door, I stopped and turned fully around to face him. For a split second, I was ready to ask him if he needed help or if he lived here. But there was nothing. He wasn't there. I stared down the hallway, saw nothing but the closed doors and the empty corridor. No sound of footsteps now, no movement. The hallway felt still and silent, as if he had never been there. I felt the back of my neck prickle. The overhead lights flickered for a second, just once, and then stayed steady. I took a breath and listened. There were no voices, no steps, no doors closing. I felt my stomach tighten and my pulse was loud in my ears. I put my key into the lock and opened my door. I went inside and locked it right away. I stood there in my small entryway holding the doorknob. My apartment felt normal. The living room lights were off, but a little glow came from the kitchen where I'd left a small light on. Everything looked the same as when I left that morning. I took off my shoes and placed them on the mat by the door. I walked through the living room, turned on a lamp, and checked the windows. They were all closed. I leaned against the kitchen counter for a moment and tried to shake off the weird feeling. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe he went into one of the apartments quickly, so I didn't see him. That must have been it. I told myself not to overthink it. I heated some leftovers in the microwave and ate, standing in the kitchen. The food tasted bland, or maybe I just wasn't paying attention to the taste. I turned on the TV in the living room and flipped through channels. I found nothing interesting, just random shows and commercials. I turned it off again. I wasn't in the mood to watch anything. I tried to focus on regular things. I checked my emails. I looked at my messages. Nothing unusual. After a while, I got ready for bed. I brushed my teeth, washed my face, and got into bed. The feeling of the sheets was familiar and soft. I turned off the lamp on the nightstand and closed my eyes. I must have fallen asleep quickly because the next thing I remember was waking up suddenly in the dark. My digital clock read 3:00 a.m. I didn't know what had woken me at first, but then I heard it again. A knock at my door. 3 quick, dull thuds. I sat up, my heart thumping. I turned on the bedside lamp. The knock came again. It was a bit louder this time. I reached for my phone. I checked the time again. It was still just after 3 in the morning. There was no reason for anyone to knock on my door at this hour. I stayed still and listened. No voices, no footsteps, just silence. Then the knock came again. I got out of bed, moved to the door as quietly as I could. I stood by it and waited. Another knock, softer this time, but steady. I leaned my eye against the peephole. I saw nothing. The hallway light was on, but I didn't see anyone standing there. Just the empty hallway. I looked carefully. No shadows, no shapes. Nothing. My stomach tightened again. I stepped back and considered calling someone, maybe the building's security desk. But I had never spoken to them at this hour, and I wasn't sure if they were always there. My building did have a small lobby area with a desk, but I had seen the security guard mostly during the day. I didn't know if anyone was there now. The knocking stopped. I held my breath and waited. Silence. I felt my heart slowing down a bit. I hoped it was just some drunk neighbor knocking on the wrong door and then wandering off. I looked again through the peephole. Still nothing. I turned and moved away from the door, heading back toward my bedroom. I reached my bed and sat down on the edge. I listened. Nothing. No sounds except the hum of my fridge in the kitchen. I turned off the bedside lamp and tried to lie down again. I couldn't sleep right away. My eyes were open, staring at the dark ceiling. I waited for any noise, any sign that something wasn't right. After a few minutes, I started feeling my eyelids getting heavy. Just as I began to drift off, I heard the knock again. It was the same. 3 dull knocks, no variation in rhythm. I sat up straight. My body felt rigid. I stood up and marched back to the door, trying to keep my breathing quiet. I switched on the hallway light inside my apartment, unlocked the door, and opened it just a crack. I kept the chain on. I looked out through the small opening. No one. The corridor was completely empty. The overhead lights were bright. I saw the doors of the other apartments, all closed. No movement. "Hello?" I said quietly. I got no response. My voice sounded small and shaky. I closed the door again and locked it. My hands felt sweaty. I wiped them on my pajama pants. I stood there for a moment, pressing my ear to the door, listening. Nothing. Just the buzz of the hallway lights. I took a few steps back. I tried to stay calm. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe someone was messing with me. I walked to the window in my living room that overlooked the street. I pushed the curtain aside and looked down. The street was empty except for a few parked cars. No one was out there. It was quiet. A few lamps lit the sidewalk, but I didn't see anyone moving around. I stood there for a while, waiting to see if I could catch someone leaving the building. Nothing. I thought about the stranger in the elevator. I remembered how he followed me down the hallway and then vanished. I wondered if he had something to do with this. I didn't understand how he could disappear so fast. There was no place to hide. The hallway is straight. No turns. No extra doors other than the apartments. If he lived here, he would have needed a key, and I would have heard a door open. But I didn't. I didn't want to think about that now. I just wanted to get through the night. I went back to my bedroom and turned on the light there. I pulled a chair from the desk and placed it near the door of my bedroom, facing the apartment's front door. I sat there, arms folded, trying to stay awake. I listened to the quiet apartment. The walls were thin enough that I might hear neighbors if they were talking or playing music, but it was silent. I could only hear my own breathing. Time passed slowly. I checked my phone. It was around 3:30 a.m. I kept waiting, expecting another knock. My muscles felt tense. My mouth was dry. I got up once to get a glass of water from the kitchen. I returned with the water and sipped it quietly. Nothing happened. Eventually, around 4 a.m., I decided to try to sleep again. I got into bed, leaving the bedroom light on. I felt safer with it on. I closed my eyes, but every few seconds I opened them to listen. I forced myself to relax, to focus on my breathing. After some time, I drifted off. I slept lightly, without any real rest. When I woke up, it was 8 a.m. The sun came in through the window. I rubbed my face and stood up. My neck was stiff. I walked to the front door and looked through the peephole again. The hallway looked normal in the morning light. I unlocked and opened the door, stepping out to check if there was anything on the ground. Nothing. The hallway smelled like cleaning products. I saw one of my neighbors leaving for work. He nodded at me and said, "Good morning." I nodded back and didn't mention anything. I got dressed and went down to the lobby. The elevator ride felt tense, but I was alone this time. When I reached the lobby, I saw the guard at the front desk. He was an older man I had spoken to once or twice. I approached him and asked if someone had come in late last night, if anyone reported strange knocks or noises. He shook his head and said it had been quiet. I described the man in the elevator. He said he hadn't seen anyone like that on his shift. He looked at me as if I were a bit paranoid. I didn't press the issue. I decided to check the mailroom before heading out. I had a package waiting. I picked it up and went outside. The morning air felt cool. I walked up the block to get coffee. I thought about what happened. I tried to push it out of my mind, but it kept nagging at me. I knew what I saw and heard. That man was definitely in the elevator. He definitely got off on my floor. He followed me. Then he vanished. And then there were those knocks at my door at 3 a.m. without anyone there. I took my coffee back upstairs and sat in my living room. I looked around. Everything seemed normal in daylight. The furniture, the walls, my TV, my kitchen. Nothing was out of place. I tried the door's peephole again just to see if the perspective somehow tricked me at night. I looked through it, saw the hallway. Everything looked clear and bright. No distortions. I spent most of that day in my apartment working from home, trying to focus on my tasks. I answered emails, did some online research, made a few phone calls. I didn't mention the incident to anyone. By lunchtime I had calmed down, but every now and then I glanced at the door expecting a knock. No knock came. I listened for footsteps in the hallway. I heard normal sounds, neighbors coming and going, doors opening and closing, muffled voices. In the evening, I thought about the elevator ride again. I tried to remember details about the stranger. I remembered his jacket, his jeans, his hair, the way he stood quietly. I remembered the exact spot in the elevator where he stood. I remembered that he never looked at me. I remembered how he followed me at the same pace, almost like a mirror. And I remembered how he was gone in an instant. Before going to bed that night, I checked the doors locked twice. I checked the windows. I left a hallway light on. I took a shower and got into bed. I was still worried something might happen again. But that night, nothing did. No knocks, no footsteps, no strange visitors. The next morning I felt more rested. I got up, made coffee, and left for work at my usual time. I tried to put it behind me. Over the next few days I kept my guard up, looking around, checking who got into the elevator with me. But I never saw that man again. The hallway remained calm and ordinary. No strange knocking at 3 a.m. Still, I didn't forget how it felt. I remembered standing in that elevator, watching him not press any button. I remembered walking down the hallway, listening to him match my steps, and then seeing him vanish. I remembered the knocks and how I never saw anyone through the peephole. These were facts. I saw and heard them. No matter how normal things looked afterward, that feeling of confusion and tension stayed in my mind. Even though I moved on with my life, I kept the memory of that night clear. I had no explanation for it. I didn't dwell on deeper meanings or strange theories. I just knew it happened. I knew what I heard and what I saw, and I knew I never wanted to experience it again. I remember that night because I was tired, a little hungry, and I just wanted to get home. I had worked late. My shift ended around 9, and I had walked a few blocks in the wrong direction because of some construction. I wanted to save some time. I decided to cut through an alley I usually avoided. It wasn't pitch dark, but the light was dim. There was a single streetlight near the entrance, and the rest of the alley stretched out with only a bit of light coming from the windows of the buildings on either side. I could see old trash cans, a few cardboard boxes, some scattered plastic bags, and dirty puddles. The place smelled like stale beer and old garbage. I remember the sound of distant traffic behind me, but inside the alley it was mostly quiet. I stepped in, trying to keep my feet away from the wet spots on the ground. I tried to move quickly. The alley ran straight for a while and then turned right, which I knew would bring me closer to my apartment building. As I walked, I heard a soft sound, like someone shifting their weight on a loose piece of pavement, but when I turned, I saw nothing. I shrugged it off. Sometimes there were rats or maybe a cat. I tried not to think too much about it. I was about halfway through when I heard my name. At first, I thought I imagined it. It was barely louder than a whisper. I froze and looked behind me. There was no one there. I looked to my left, then my right. The alley was empty. I could see the rough brick walls on either side. A few old posters were peeling off. One of the trash cans had its lid half open, and there was some shredded plastic sticking out. I saw nothing else. I waited a moment, listening. All I heard was the distant hum of traffic and maybe a dripping pipe somewhere. I turned forward again and walked, now feeling a bit uneasy. My heart thumped a little harder. My skin felt warm around my neck. I tried to act calm, but I looked behind me once more. Still nothing. That's when I heard it again. My name. It was clearer this time, and it sounded closer. Someone said it quietly, like they were standing just a few steps away. I spun around. The alley was still empty. I said, "Who's there?" Out loud. My voice sounded too loud in that quiet place. No response. I looked carefully. I could see the details of the walls, the ground, even some small cracks. I saw no place where a person could hide. There were no doors nearby, no recessed doorways, no large piles of trash tall enough to hide a person behind them. Only a few small boxes and cans, nothing big. The alley was maybe 8 or 9 feet wide, and I could see from one wall to the other. There was nowhere for someone to stand without me noticing. I took a deep breath. I felt a heaviness in my stomach. Something was off. I said my own name out loud to see if my mind was playing tricks on me. It sounded different from what I heard. The voice calling me sounded softer and slightly deeper than my own. It definitely wasn't an echo. I tried to ignore it and kept walking, but a few steps later I heard it again, this time from ahead of me. I stared forward. I could see the corner where the alley turned. I strained my eyes, but there was no one. The light was weak. The streetlight behind me didn't reach that far. The only illumination came from a small window on the second floor of the building to my left, and it was too faint to show more than shapes. I walked forward slowly, trying not to make noise. My shoes scraped a bit on the concrete. I tried to keep my breathing steady. I knew something was wrong. It wasn't just hearing my name. It was the feeling that someone was right there, close to me, watching me. My neck felt tense and my shoulders were tight. My palms were getting sweaty and my throat felt dry. I wanted to get out of that alley as fast as possible, but I also didn't want to walk straight into whoever was playing this game. I reached into my jacket pocket for my phone. I gripped it tight. I considered calling someone. The thought that I might seem paranoid stopped me. I decided to just keep moving. I took a few more steps and then I heard my name again, right behind me this time. I spun around so fast that I almost slipped on a wet patch. Still, no one. My heart was beating harder. I could feel my pulse in my ears. I looked up at the fire escapes overhead, but they were empty metal structures. No one stood on them. There were no shadows up there. I stood still for at least 20 seconds, turning my head from side to side, trying to catch any movement. Nothing. Just the dim light, the smell of trash, the quiet drip of water. I could hear my own breathing now, fast and shallow. I wanted to run, but I didn't want to run blindly and fall or get cornered. Instead, I walked backward for a few steps, keeping my eyes in front of me and then behind me, alternating every few seconds. That made me dizzy, so I stopped and faced forward again. If someone was there, they were hiding too well. But how could they hide in a place like this? I reached the turn in the alley. I stepped around the corner, pressing my back against the wall before looking ahead. The next stretch of alley was even darker. There was a dim light at the far end, probably from a distant street lamp. I could see broken concrete and a large dumpster on the left side. The dumpster's lid was closed. There was a small stack of crates near it. They were wooden, probably empty. I could see a patch of moss or mold on the ground and a slight incline leading toward the main street at the far end. I knew my building was just a short walk after I got out of here. I took a step forward, and as soon as I moved, I heard my name again. This time it seemed to come from my right side. I looked right. There was nothing but a wall. No doors, no windows at eye level. I noticed a small ventilation window near the top, but it was too high for anyone to reach. I listened carefully. Nothing now. I licked my lips and tasted salt from my sweat. My heart was still racing. I said, "I know you're there. What do you want?" I tried to keep my voice steady, but it cracked slightly. No answer. I walked closer to the dumpster, thinking maybe someone was crouching behind it. I approached it slowly, one hand gripping my phone in my pocket. My other hand was free. I felt the urge to clench my fists. As I got near, I smelled something rotten. Probably old food. I reached the edge of the dumpster and leaned forward, trying to peek behind it. It was empty space. No one there. I kicked the crates with my foot. They were light and slid a bit, but nothing was behind them. Suddenly, my name again. This time it was so close I jumped. It sounded right next to my ear. I turned around, almost losing my balance. The alley behind me was empty, just as before. My chest felt tight, and I wanted to leave this place. I walked faster now, almost jogging, but careful not to slip. My shoes made a damp sound on the ground. Every few steps I glanced behind me. Still nothing. The alley felt longer than before. I noticed details I hadn't before. A small pipe with water dripping, a torn piece of fabric stuck to a nail on the wall, a flattened soda can near a drain. I heard my name again, this time from ahead of me, softer but still there. I stopped and held my breath. I thought maybe I could lure whoever it was into making a sound so I could spot them. I waited 5-10 seconds, holding my breath until my chest started to burn. Then I let out the air and said, "Show yourself." Nothing. Just silence. I kept walking. My legs felt weak and my stomach kept twisting. I tried to focus on getting out. My apartment was just a short walk once I reached the main street. I passed another stack of trash bags. They looked wet and sagged against the wall. I nudged one with my foot, trying to see if someone could be hiding behind it. It was soft and squishy, just trash. I moved past it. Halfway down this second stretch, my phone vibrated in my pocket. I jumped at the sensation. I pulled it out and checked it. It was just a message from a coworker asking if I had made it home. I typed back quickly. Almost. On my way. I didn't mention anything about what was happening. I didn't know how to explain it. It sounded crazy. I put the phone back in my pocket and looked around again. I could see the end of the alley now, maybe 20 yards ahead. Beyond it was a more well-lit street. I could see parts of parked cars, the edge of a sidewalk, and a bit of a storefront sign. If I could get there, I'd feel safer. I moved forward. 10 yards left. I felt a breeze coming from the street. It carried the smell of exhaust fumes and fried food from a nearby diner. I wanted to run, but I forced myself not to. If I ran and tripped, I'd be stuck here. I took steady steps. With every step, I glanced to the sides, behind me, above me. There was nothing, just the same empty alley. But the voice wouldn't leave my mind. I kept hearing it in my head now, even when it wasn't sounding in the air. It made me tense, made me question my own senses. 5 yards left. Then I heard it again, but this time it didn't say my name. It just made a soft sound, like a quiet exhale. I stopped and listened. The sound came from behind me. I turned. The alley behind me looked exactly the same. Dark, empty, quiet. I listened harder. Nothing. Just my own breathing and the distant city sounds. I said, "I can hear you." I felt stupid saying it. No answer. I turned back toward the street and took those last steps. When I reached the end of the alley, I stood there, half in darkness, half in the glow of the streetlights. I looked back into the alley one last time. I wanted to see if something would move now that I was leaving. The alley was still empty, just wet pavement, trash and dim walls. I waited a few seconds, listening, expecting to hear my name again. It didn't come. I stepped out onto the sidewalk. The street was calm. One car passed slowly. I saw a man leaning against a wall about half a block away, smoking. He didn't look at me. I saw a couple walking on the opposite side of the street, holding shopping bags. They didn't look my way. Everything looked normal. Everything sounded normal. My heart rate was still high. My shirt felt damp with sweat. I wiped my forehead with the back of my hand. My mouth was dry. I swallowed a few times. I turned in the direction of my apartment. It was only 2 blocks away. I walked fast, trying to get some distance from that alley. My mind was racing, but I tried to focus on what was right in front of me. I passed a closed bookstore, a barber shop with its lights off, a couple of old benches on the sidewalk. After a few minutes, I reached my building. It was a 3-story structure with a small lobby. I had to use my key to enter. My hand shook a bit as I unlocked the door. Once inside, I walked straight up the stairs to my apartment on the 2nd floor. The hallway smelled like cleaning products. The light was bright. I fumbled with my keys, unlocked my door, and entered my apartment, locking the door behind me. My place was quiet. Just my old couch, my small TV, my kitchen table. Everything looked normal. I sat down at the table and just breathed, in and out, until my heart slowed down. I could still feel the tension in my shoulders and neck. I didn't know what to think. I heard my name whispered several times and I saw no one. The alley was empty. I had no explanation. My body still felt tired, my legs a bit shaky. I grabbed a glass from the cabinet and filled it with tap water. I drank it in a few big gulps. I felt a slight ache in my stomach, probably from all the nervous energy. I took another minute to calm down. Then I walked to my living room window and looked outside. I could see the street, the lights, and the distant corner where I knew that alley entrance was located. I couldn't see the alley itself from this angle. I stood there for a long moment just looking at the normal scene outside. A car parked, a man crossed the street, someone rode by on a bike. No strange voices, no whispers, just normal city sounds. Eventually, I pulled the curtains closed. I decided I would avoid that alley from now on, no matter how inconvenient. I felt safer in my apartment. It was quiet, well lit, and everything made sense here. I stayed up for a while that night, drinking water, pacing a bit, trying to shake off the feeling that something had been there, calling me, messing with me. I knew I wouldn't find any answers. I just knew I didn't want to go through that alley again. When I finally turned off the lights and lay down in bed, I could still remember the exact sound of my name spoken softly in that empty space. I tried not to think about it too much. I was just glad to be inside, with a locked door and a clear sense that I had gotten away from something I couldn't understand. I remember that night clearly. It was late, probably past midnight. The streets were almost empty, and the air felt colder than usual. I was tired, but still focused on my job. I was working as a driver for a ride service. I had been on the road for several hours picking up passengers in different parts of the city. Most were normal trips. People going home from bars, a couple going to a hotel, a man rushing to catch a late-night train. Nothing unusual. Then I got this request. The pickup point was at the edge of a residential area, not too far from the center. I accepted it without a second thought, like any other ride. I pulled up at the address the app had given me. It was a street with dim lighting, a couple of old houses, a few small parked cars, and not much else. I waited about a minute. The passenger approached from the sidewalk on my right. He was a man, probably in his mid-40s. He wore a jacket, jeans, and sneakers. He walked slowly and didn't seem drunk or high. He opened the rear door and got inside without saying much. He closed the door and gave me a location. I glanced at the destination pin on my phone. It was outside the city, close to a rural area, about 30 minutes away. I thought it was a little odd, but it wasn't my first time driving someone out of town. Sometimes people had family in isolated places, or they wanted to get away from the city for some reason. I pressed the start button on the app and began driving. The streets were quiet as I followed the directions. The man sat in the back seat. He kept his gaze somewhere in the darkness outside. He didn't talk at first. After about 10 minutes, I asked if he was comfortable with the route. He just said, "Keep going," in a calm voice. I didn't push. I kept driving. The GPS showed a route that would take a main road, then turn onto smaller roads. There weren't many lights in that direction, but I knew some rural areas had very few street lamps. I tried not to think too hard about it. The passenger didn't show any emotion. He wasn't smiling, he wasn't frowning. He looked calm. His voice, when he spoke, was steady and quiet. We left the main part of town and entered a smaller road with fewer signs. There were patches of trees and bushes on both sides. The headlights of my car illuminated a narrow strip of asphalt ahead. The sky was dark with no stars visible. The passenger suddenly said, "Take a right turn up ahead." I checked my GPS, but it said to go straight. I hesitated for a second, then slowed down. The man repeated, "Take the right turn." His voice was louder now. I felt a slight tension in my chest. It wasn't panic yet, but I was aware that something was off. I asked, "Are you sure? The GPS suggests going straight." He said, "Yes, right turn. Don't worry about the app." I turned right onto a smaller road. It was even darker here. The asphalt gave way to a rough surface with dirt and gravel. I heard small rocks rattling under my tires. I clenched the wheel and tried to focus on the path ahead. My headlights were the only source of light. The passenger leaned forward slightly, but I couldn't see his face clearly in the rearview mirror. His figure was a dark shape against the seat. After a few minutes, the road split again. The GPS was useless now, trying to reroute in confusion. The passenger told me to turn left. I did. We went deeper into this area with no signs and no buildings. My heart rate increased. The interior of the car felt warm, even though it was cold outside. I noticed my breathing was getting faster. I asked, "Is this place safe? It's really dark out here." He answered quietly, "Yes. Keep going." I didn't argue. I just drove. We passed a small clearing where I could see a fence and some overgrown grass. There were no animals around, no other cars, not even the distant hum of traffic, just the sound of my engine and the gravel. After another turn, the passenger said, "Stop here." I slowed down and brought the car to a halt. I looked around, but I couldn't see anything except the vague outline of trees and a patch of ground covered in weeds. The headlights illuminated a short stretch ahead, but it ended in darkness. There were no lights on any distant houses, no porch lamps, nothing. The passenger opened the door and stepped out. He didn't say anything about payment. The ride was prepaid through the app, so I guessed he was done. He stood outside for a moment. I rolled down my window slightly and said, "Is everything all right?" He didn't answer. He just moved away from the car and disappeared into the darkness ahead. I couldn't see where he went. He didn't use a flashlight or his phone's screen. It was like he knew exactly where to go. I felt uneasy. My mouth was dry and my hands were clammy on the steering wheel. I decided I should probably leave. There was nothing else for me to do here. I shifted into reverse and checked my mirrors. That's when I saw something that made my stomach tighten. In the rearview mirror, I noticed two shapes in the darkness behind the car. They were a distance away, maybe 20 or 30 feet back. I couldn't see their faces, but I could make out two human figures. They stood side by side, not moving much. My first thought was to stay calm. I wanted to get out of there. I looked forward again, trying to see if the passenger was still in front of the car. I saw nothing, just the silent darkness. I turned on my high beams for a moment, hoping to see something that would put me at ease. But all I got was a better look at empty ground and some bushes. I turned the high beams off again. I didn't want to attract too much attention. In the mirror, the two figures were still there. I couldn't tell if they were looking at me. My heart was pounding. I considered rolling down the window and calling out, but I decided against it. I didn't know who they were. I didn't know if they were armed or if they meant any harm. My chest felt tight, and I could feel sweat on my neck. The silence made everything worse. There was no wind, no cars, no voices. Just me in that car with two strangers standing behind it, and my passenger gone somewhere ahead. I started to back up slowly, moving in reverse, hoping to put some distance between me and the figures. As I reversed, I kept my eyes on them. They didn't run toward me. They stayed where they were. When my brake lights lit the area behind the car, I saw them more clearly. They were definitely two people, both wearing dark clothing. I couldn't see their faces. Their heads were slightly bent forward, or maybe they were just looking straight at me. My chest felt even tighter now. I swallowed hard. I stopped the car again and thought about what to do. The passenger had told me to come here, had made me leave the known route. Now I was stuck in a remote spot with no streetlights. I had 1 bar of cell service, maybe enough to get back on the map. I glanced at my phone. The app was still running. The screen showed my location as a dead-end road in a rural zone. I had no idea where I was exactly. I locked the doors. I heard the click of the locks and hoped that would be enough if they tried something. They still didn't move. They just stood there. I wondered if they were waiting for something, or if they were just curious. I looked around for another way out. The road was narrow. To my left and right there were bushes and small trees. I didn't want to drive off the road and get stuck. I needed to stay calm and not do anything stupid. I took a deep breath and decided to drive forward a bit, and then try to turn around. I put the car in drive and eased it forward. The road was rough and I felt every bump. The headlights showed nothing but empty space and weeds. I drove maybe 40 or 50 feet ahead. I didn't see any sign of the passenger. I decided to try a 3-point turn. I backed up a little, then turned the wheel and moved forward again. The angle was awkward because of the uneven ground, but after a few tries I managed to face the car back toward the way I came. I checked the rearview mirror again. The two figures were still there, standing at the spot where I had stopped before. They hadn't followed me. I felt slightly less trapped, but still on edge. My heart was still racing, and my throat felt dry. I didn't see anyone else around. I didn't hear any voices. I rolled the window down just a bit to listen. Nothing. Absolute silence. I thought about calling someone, maybe reporting something to the police, but I had nothing concrete to say. No crime had been committed that I knew of. My passenger had simply left the car on his own. These two people were just standing there. Maybe they were local residents or people who lived out here. It didn't make sense, but I didn't have time to analyze. I just wanted to get out of there. I decided to leave. I pressed the gas pedal gently and started to move back the way I came. The dirt and gravel crunched under the tires. I kept looking in the mirror. The figures got smaller as I drove away. They still didn't move. When I reached the first turn, I slowed down and tried to remember which way we had come. The GPS tried to reroute me to the main road. I followed the route on the screen. The feeling in my chest eased a bit once I saw a more recognizable road sign. I passed it and saw a faint light in the distance, probably from a farmhouse. I didn't know what to think. I felt sweaty and tired. My hands were shaking a little, so I gripped the wheel harder. I just wanted to get back to the city. After a few more turns, I reached a paved road with a single street lamp at the corner. I slowed down under the lamp, glanced at my phone, and took a second to breathe. I thought about the passenger. He had seemed calm but had led me out to that dark place. Why? He never told me. He never explained. Maybe he had friends waiting for him there. Maybe he was involved in something I didn't understand, but I didn't see him meet anyone. I only saw those two figures after he left. I kept driving until I found my way back onto a familiar road. I passed a gas station that was closed for the night. The neon sign was off and there were no cars around. I didn't stop. I wanted to get back to the main part of the city. After another 15 minutes, I saw the distant glow of streetlights. I turned onto a busier street and felt some relief. A few cars passed by. The normal sounds of civilization surrounded me again. I felt safer. I didn't know who those people were or why they were out there. I didn't know what my passenger's purpose was, but I was back in a place with lights and people. I ended the ride on the app. It showed that the trip had been completed successfully. Payment processed. There was no comment from the passenger. No rating left. I sat there for a moment, engine idling at a red light, and tried to calm down. My throat was still dry. I noticed my shirt was damp under the arms. I looked at my reflection in the mirror. My eyes looked tired. I pressed my lips together, then took a sip of water from the bottle I keep in the cup holder. The water was lukewarm, but it helped. I decided I wouldn't tell anyone about this ride right away. I didn't even know how to describe it. Just a strange trip to a dark place. The passenger disappeared, and I saw two people in the dark. No one attacked me. No one demanded anything. Nothing was stolen. It was just odd and unsettling. I gripped the wheel and continued driving, heading back toward more familiar neighborhoods. I picked up another passenger an hour later, a normal guy going to a hotel. That trip went fine, but I didn't shake the feeling that something had been off that night. Even now, I remember those two figures standing in the darkness, not moving, not speaking, just watching. I remember the chill in my chest, my heart pounding, and the absolute silence around us. I remember the passenger's calm voice telling me to turn off the main route. I remember the absence of any normal signs of life. I never found out what it meant, and I guess I never will. I was sitting on a wooden bench near the center of a public park. It was late, probably close to midnight, but I didn't check the time. I had gone out for a run because I couldn't sleep. The weather was mild, the air still. The park had a jogging path that looped around a pond and some trees. There were a few lampposts, but most of the path was dark. I had been running for about 20 minutes when I decided to rest. I stopped near a bench under a dim lamp. The area around me was quiet. No wind, no voices, no distant cars. The ground was a mix of dirt and gravel. It crunched a little under my shoes when I approached the bench. I sat down and leaned forward to catch my breath. I felt sweat on my forehead and back. My legs were warm and a little tired. I didn't hear anyone else around. I glanced left and right. To my right was a small patch of tall bushes. To my left, about 20 feet away, there was another bench under a weaker light. At first, I didn't notice anyone there. Then I turned my head again and saw a figure sitting very still. It was a person dressed in dark clothing. I couldn't see any details. There was no movement. This person was sitting on the bench in a rigid posture and seemed to be looking straight at me. I squinted and tried to see more clearly. The light was not good. The figure had a hood pulled up over its head. I couldn't see a face. I thought maybe they were wearing a ski mask or something similar. They didn't move at all. I felt a sudden tension in my shoulders. There was something off about how still they were. I waited a few seconds, expecting them to turn away or get up or do something. They remained completely still. I decided it was time to get moving. I didn't want to hang around. Something about the figure made me nervous. It could have been just another runner taking a break, but I didn't see any sign of normal behavior. Most people would look around, cough, stretch, or adjust their position. This person did none of that. I stood up and stretched my arms. I looked away from the figure, trying to appear casual. Then I turned and started walking back toward the path. As I took my first steps, I glanced over my shoulder. The figure stood up too. I didn't like that. My legs felt heavy and I noticed my heart rate speeding up again. I tried to think logically. Maybe it was just coincidence. Maybe they were leaving at the same time. I decided not to panic. I just wanted to keep a good distance. I began to walk along the path. The gravel made a slight crunch under my running shoes. I checked behind me after a few steps. The figure was following me. Not running, just walking at first, but following. I picked up my pace. My thighs and calves were already warm from the previous run, so I could run again if I needed to. I didn't want to sprint yet. I wanted to be sure I wasn't imagining this. Maybe this was some stranger taking the same route out of the park. Still, I felt uneasy. There was no one else around. The park was usually empty this late. I turned my head again. The figure was still behind me, closer now, moving faster than before. That was enough. I started jogging. I heard my own breathing become more forceful. My ears caught a soft sound behind me, like shoes hitting the dirt and gravel. I glanced back quickly. The figure was now running. I could see arms pumping slightly, legs moving in quick strides. The hood covered the head completely. The face area looked smooth and blank in the dim light. There were no features. It looked like a person without a face, just a patch of dark nothing. I felt a surge of panic shoot through my chest. My muscles tensed and I ran faster. I didn't know what to do. The path went around the park. The nearest exit gate was on the far side, maybe a quarter-mile away. The figure was gaining on me, or at least keeping up. I listened to the sound of my own footsteps. I heard the footsteps behind me too, slightly offbeat, getting louder. I tried to focus on the path. My eyes scanned for possible escape routes. There was a large patch of trees and shrubs to my left. If I ran into them, I might lose the figure, but I could also trip or get stuck. On the right was a chain-link fence separating the park from a quiet street. The fence was too high to climb easily. I ran harder. My chest tightened. My breathing grew louder. My arms pumped back and forth. I tried to keep my balance and maintain speed. I tried to think if I had any way to defend myself. I didn't carry anything with me. I had no phone, no keys, nothing in my pockets except a packet of tissues. I glanced back again. The figure was just a few steps behind. I couldn't see any face at all, only darkness under the hood. The way the head moved suggested a human shape, but the lack of a face made no sense. It was like a blank mask. I saw shoulders and arms, legs in long pants, running shoes. The running form looked natural enough, but completely silent except for the footfalls. I pushed my legs harder. I passed another bench, this one empty. The lamps were few and far between. My eyes tried to pick out a better lit area ahead. I knew there was a small fountain near the park's center. If I could get there, maybe I could find something to use as a weapon. Or maybe I would see another person passing by. Anything would help. I changed direction and cut through a patch of grass, hoping to throw the figure off. My shoes sank into the soft ground. It slowed me down. I heard the footsteps behind me also move onto the grass. I tried to accelerate, but my legs were starting to ache. My lungs burned. I hadn't planned on running this hard tonight. I reached a small clearing with a single lamp. Under that lamp was a garbage can and a broken bench. I grabbed the edge of the garbage can and tried to push it behind me as I ran past. It was heavier than I expected, just barely budging. I wasted a second or two on that. I looked back and saw the figure closing in. I heard the footsteps get louder. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. I had to do something else. I noticed a narrow path leading off to one side, toward a maintenance shed I'd seen before. Maybe it was locked, but maybe not. I veered onto that path. It was darker here. My eyes struggled to adjust. I stumbled over a small root. I caught myself, but lost a second. The footsteps sounded closer. I felt real fear. It was a physical sensation, like a cramp in my stomach and chest. My hands felt cold and damp. I tried not to fall. I reached the maintenance shed. It had a padlock on the door. The walls were made of wood and metal. There was a stack of wooden pallets next to it. I grabbed one and tried to lift it. It was awkward and heavy. I heard the footsteps right behind me. I turned around quickly. The figure was about 6 or 7 feet away, standing still under no light, so I only saw a shape. I raised the pallet and swung it, stepping forward to try to hit the figure. I felt a jolt when the pallet struck something. It connected with a shoulder or arm. The figure stumbled back a step but made no sound. I dropped the pallet and ran again before it could recover. My legs felt weaker now. I breathed through my mouth, sucking in air that smelled like damp grass and soil. The path ahead split in 2 directions. One way led back to the main loop, another headed toward a small bridge over a creek. I went toward the bridge. It was a simple wooden footbridge, maybe 10 feet long. On the other side was a cluster of bushes, and then a slope leading up to the main gate. I remembered that from daylight visits. I dashed onto the bridge. My footsteps on the wood sounded hollow and loud. Halfway across, I looked back. The figure was on the other end of the bridge, just standing there, not advancing. I took a second to watch, panting, my chest heaving. The figure stood completely still, just like before, facing me. I couldn't see a face, just darkness where a face should be. I noticed the figure's hands hanging at the sides. They looked pale under the hood's shadow, but I couldn't be sure. I wiped sweat from my forehead with the back of my hand. I didn't want to wait there any longer. I ran off the bridge and into the bushes. The branches scratched at my arms and legs. I pushed through, feeling leaves hit my face. I emerged onto the slope. The dirt here was loose, and I had to lean forward to climb. My shoes slipped a bit. I grabbed at some exposed roots for balance. I looked back again. The figure was moving slowly across the bridge now. No hurry, just a steady walk. I gritted my teeth and pushed up the slope. My calf muscles were screaming. At the top, I could see the park's main gate about 50 yards away. It was a simple iron gate, usually closed at night, but not locked. I had come through it earlier. Outside was a sidewalk and a quiet street. Maybe I could find a car passing by, or at least get away from this isolated area. I ran toward the gate. My steps were uneven now. I felt a sharp pain in my side. I forced myself forward anyway. I needed to get out of here. I could hear nothing behind me now. I glanced back and saw nothing. The figure might still be coming, but I had put some distance between us. The gate got closer. My hands shook as I approached it. I grabbed the gate's handle and pulled. It opened with a creak. I slipped through and slammed it shut behind me. It didn't lock, but it at least might slow the figure down. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, breathing hard, trying to calm myself. There was a single street light on this corner. The street was empty. I didn't see cars or pedestrians. I turned around and looked through the gaps in the gate. The park was dark. The path, the trees, the bushes, all looked like shapes of black and gray. I didn't see the figure. I tried to listen. The only sounds were my breathing and a distant humming noise, maybe from a nearby utility box. My heart was still racing. My legs felt unsteady. My clothes stuck to my skin. I took a few steps along the sidewalk, glancing back at the gate every few seconds. After maybe 10 or 15 seconds, I saw a movement in the darkness behind the gate. The figure's hooded head appeared between 2 bars of the gate about 20 feet away inside the park. I stepped back, away from the gate. I didn't want to run anymore. I was on public property now, outside the park. I could shout if I needed to. I looked around. No one was there. The figure stood inside the park, just on the other side of the gate. The gate was still open a crack. I had not been able to close it fully. The figure stepped closer. I thought about running down the street. If I kept going, I would reach a main road eventually. There would be lights, maybe a store still open, maybe a security guard somewhere. I turned and started to jog down the sidewalk, heading away from the park. I listened for footsteps behind me, but the sidewalk was harder. and my own breathing was too loud to let me hear well. I took the first corner I found, turned right, and moved along a row of bushes lining someone's property. The street here had fewer lights. I looked back. I saw the figure about half a block behind me. It was now on the sidewalk, under a streetlight. The hood was still up. The face area was still dark. The figure had followed me out of the park. My throat felt dry. I swallowed and tried to think clearly. I needed to lose this person or whatever it was. I picked up the pace again. My lungs felt raw. I looked ahead and saw a small parking lot behind a building. It was empty. Maybe I could hide there. I ran into the parking lot. It was about 20 yards deep and walled on 3 sides by fences and a loading dock. There was only one way in and out. That might not be good. If the figure followed me in, I'd be trapped. I realized that too late. I turned to see if the figure was following. At the edge of the parking lot, the figure stood still just outside the entrance. The hooded head tilted slightly. I felt a wave of panic. I backed away. The figure stepped forward, slowly. I felt the urge to speak, to say something, but I stayed silent. My voice would probably shake anyway. The figure took another step. I looked around for a weapon. There was a loose piece of wood lying near a dumpster. I grabbed it with my right hand. It felt rough. I held it up, ready to swing. My arm shook. The figure took another step, coming into the parking lot's pale light. I could now see the shape more clearly. The figure wore a black hooded sweatshirt and black pants. The shoes looked like normal running shoes. The figure's face area looked like smooth skin without eyes, nose, or mouth. I saw a hint of pale color but no features. It was like looking at a blank human head covered in skin. I felt my stomach tighten and my knees weaken. I didn't understand what I was seeing. I gripped the wood tighter. My breathing came in short, fast bursts. The figure stopped about 10 feet away. I held the wood out in front of me. My arms ached. I didn't speak. I waited. The figure stood still, head slightly tilted. The tension felt like it was pressing on my chest. I wanted to run, but I couldn't look away. I took one step back. The figure didn't move. I took another step back. The figure remained where it was. I turned and bolted toward the exit of the parking lot. I ran past the figure, giving it as wide a berth as possible. It didn't reach out. It didn't move. I rushed onto the sidewalk, stumbling. I looked back. The figure still stood inside the parking lot in the same spot. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't wait to find out. I ran down the street, my legs protesting every step. I kept going. I followed the sidewalk until I reached a better-lit intersection. I paused under a bright streetlight. My heart still raced. My tongue tasted bitter. I glanced behind me again. There was no sign of the figure on the street. Everything looked quiet. After a while, I forced myself to walk, not run. I kept checking behind me. Nothing appeared. I listened for footsteps. Only my own shoes on the concrete. I passed a few closed shops. I saw a couple of parked cars. No movement in the windows. No one else around. I walked all the way home, never seeing the figure again. I kept looking over my shoulder every few seconds, expecting to see that hooded shape, that blank face, those steady, silent footsteps. I didn't see it again. By the time I reached my door, my clothes were soaked with sweat and my legs felt like lead. I opened my door and locked it behind me. My hands were still shaking. I pressed my ear against the door and listened. I heard nothing. I spent the rest of that night pacing inside my apartment, checking the window every few minutes, making sure the figure wasn't waiting outside. I never saw it again, but I couldn't relax for hours. Every small sound made me jump. I kept remembering that blank face and the silent chase through the park. I had no explanation. I felt only relief that I got away. I was sore for 2 days afterward. I never went back to that park at night again. I remember that night very clearly. It was past midnight. I was on my bike heading home along that narrow country road. The air was dry, and the pavement felt rough under my tires. I had no music playing. I had no company. Just the sound of the chain turning whenever I moved my legs. I wanted to get home, lock the door, and fall asleep. There were no other cars, no lights from houses, and no reason to stop for anything. I was focused on keeping a steady pace and not thinking about how dark it was outside my small headlamp's reach. I saw the car's headlights up ahead. They were on the right side of the road. The lights were not steady. They seemed to flicker on and off. At first, I thought it was just some roadside assistance vehicle or maybe someone trying to fix a flat tire. The car was not running. Its engine was off. I could only see the faint glow of its front and rear lights blinking. I slowed down because it was the only thing that stood out in that quiet stretch. I did not see anyone around. I did not hear any voices. The car's four-way flashers were on, but no one waved for help. I approached it carefully. I braked when I was a few feet away. I kept one foot on the ground and one on the pedal. I said, "Hello? Is anyone there?" I expected to hear some reply. Maybe someone would say they had engine trouble or needed a spare tire. Instead, I heard nothing. The car doors were closed. The trunk was closed. The windows were up. I looked inside. Empty seats, no bags, no keys in the ignition, just a dark interior. Everything was still except for the blinking lights outside. I felt uneasy standing there. I knew it was not normal to find a car like that. Lights on and no one around in the middle of the night. I looked up and down the road. Nothing. No headlights in the distance. No sounds of an approaching engine. No footsteps. Just the faint hum of insects and the soft rustling of leaves along the ditch. I noticed movement in the bushes about 20 feet away. At first, I thought it might be a stray dog or some small animal, but the way the bushes shook made it seem bigger than that. I whispered to myself, "What is that?" I did not want to shout. I did not want to attract attention if it was something that could harm me. I leaned forward on my bike. I wanted to see if something would step out. I listened closely. I heard breathing, but it was not my own. It was low and uneven, like someone struggling to keep quiet. I kept my eyes on the bushes. My heart felt heavier. My breathing got faster. I gripped my handlebars tighter. I saw something move behind the leaves. A shape, dark and crouched, pushing through the shrubs. I could not identify it at first. It was not tall, but it was not small either. Its shape was uneven, like a person hunched down. I stayed still. I watched as it moved again. It slowly emerged from the side of the road, stepping onto the asphalt. The creature's posture was odd. Its limbs looked long. Its head seemed too low. It did not speak. It did not growl. It just stood there, facing me, about 15 feet away. I could see it more clearly under my bike's headlamp and the car's flashing lights. Its skin looked rough, maybe covered in coarse hair. It had 2 arms and 2 legs, but the way it positioned them seemed unnatural. It stood on 2 legs, but its spine was bent forward. Its arms hung almost to its knees. I could not see the details of its face. I could not tell if it was a person with some deformity or an animal that I had never seen before. I did not smell anything strange, but I felt dread. My shoulders tensed. My stomach sank. I wanted to leave, but I stood there trying to understand what I was looking at. Then it took a step toward me. Just one step. It made no sound, but I saw the movement. My breath caught in my throat. I stepped back. I felt my heel hit the pedal. My heart pounded. I said in a low voice, "Hey, I don't want any trouble." The creature did not respond. It took another step. Now it was about 10 feet away. I could see its chest moving up and down. It was breathing heavily. It seemed focused on me. I decided to leave. I did not want to figure out what it wanted. I pushed down on the pedal, easing my bike forward. The creature stepped forward again. It matched my pace. I tried to move slowly at first, hoping it would lose interest. It did not. As I gained speed, it quickened its steps. I saw it lean forward, arms swinging slightly. legs moving with a steady gait. It was following me, and it was not losing ground. I pedaled harder. I felt my legs ache. The road was flat, which helped, but I could not rely on speed alone if this thing could run as fast as I suspected. I decided not to look back for a while. I focused on the road ahead. My headlamp lit a small circle of asphalt. My breathing got louder. I could hear the chain and the tires. I felt sweat forming under my shirt. I forced myself to keep a steady pace, but I had to know if it was still there. I glanced over my shoulder. The creature was behind me, about the same distance as before, maybe 10 feet. It was running now, its arms pumping. I could see that it moved smoothly, no stumbling, no hesitation. I faced forward again. I gritted my teeth. I whispered curses under my breath. I had no weapon. I had nothing but my bike and a small toolkit in the bag strapped to the frame. My phone was in my pocket, but I had no signal out here, and even if I did, I could not imagine explaining this to anyone. I just wanted to get away. I tried to increase my speed. My thighs started to burn. The wind passed my ears. The quiet night was gone. Now it was just the rush of air and my own heartbeat. I checked over my shoulder again. The creature was keeping up, its body low to the ground, legs pushing off with force. I saw its shadow stretch in the faint light of my lamp. It reached out an arm. I saw its hand open and close, as if trying to grab something in front of it. I faced forward and pushed harder. I passed a small barn on the right side of the road. It was dark and locked up. I thought about stopping and hiding inside, but I saw no easy way in. I kept moving. The creature stayed right behind me. I felt panic rise in my chest. My mouth was dry. My palms were sweaty. I tried to think of a way out. The road went straight for a while, then turned left near a row of trees. If I reached those trees, maybe I could lose it by leaving the road. But then I would be in the dark with no idea where to go. I decided to stay on the road for now. As I approached the curve, I tried to swerve suddenly to the left to see if I could break its rhythm. I pulled the handlebars and leaned in. The bike responded quickly. I almost lost my balance, but corrected myself in time. I glanced back. The creature followed the turn without slowing down. It did not slip. It did not hesitate. It was on my trail like a trained predator. My chest tightened. I swallowed hard. I tried to keep my focus on the pavement, on my breathing, on the movement of my legs. Ahead, I saw a small wooden bridge that crossed a narrow creek. The creek's water was low that time of year. The bridge had no lights. It was just a few planks of wood with some rails. I thought about stopping in the middle of the bridge and kicking at the creature if it tried to reach me. But if it was strong, I would not stand a chance. I had no idea how strong it was. I had no idea what it wanted. I decided not to stop. I crossed the bridge. The boards creaked under my wheels. I heard nothing behind me but the sound of the creature's steps. I kept going. After the bridge, I saw a faint light in the distance. It might have been a farmhouse porch light. If I could get closer to it, maybe I could find someone to help me. Maybe the creature would back off if there were more people around. I tried to increase my speed again. My legs ached. My lungs hurt. I felt a cramp building in my side. I fought against it. I forced my legs to keep pumping. I listened to the chain clicking, the wheels spinning, the air rushing. I looked back. The creature was there, but now it seemed a few feet further away. I might have gained some distance. This encouraged me. I leaned forward, placing more weight on the handlebars, and pedaled harder. I ignored the cramp. I focused on that light ahead. I wanted to reach it. I wanted to feel safer. I wanted to get away from this thing on my heels. As I got closer to the light, I could see that it was not a porch. It was just an old street lamp near an abandoned gas station. The building had broken windows and boarded up doors. There would be no help there. Still, I had some light. I passed under the lamp and could see my surroundings better. Tall grass on both sides of the road. The gas station's cracked asphalt lot. Empty fuel pumps. The creature passed through the light too. I caught a glimpse of its face for the first time. Its eyes were dark and set deep in its head. Its mouth was slightly open. I could see what looked like sharp, uneven teeth. It made no sound. Its skin looked tough and dirty. I felt a wave of fear push through my chest. I breathed faster. I did not stop. I continued on. I was surprised that it had not made any noise or tried a different tactic. It just followed me, like it knew I would tire eventually. I tried not to think about that. I tried to stay focused on pedaling. Ahead, the road rose slightly, an incline. Not a big hill, but enough to slow me down. I had no choice. I had to go over it. I started climbing, standing up on the pedals, using my body weight to push down harder. My bike slowed. I could not maintain the same speed going uphill. My lungs burned. Sweat dripped into my eyes, making them sting. I blinked to clear my vision. I felt my heart thumping. I looked back. The creature was gaining. It closed the gap by a few feet. It reached out with its arms again, grabbing at the air. I could hear its breathing now, heavy and strained. It sounded eager. I panicked. I pushed my legs until they felt like they would give out. The bike crept up the incline, inch by inch. My mouth was open wide, sucking in air. I thought about dropping something behind me to slow it down. I reached back with one hand and fumbled with the small bag attached to my bike frame. I could not afford to lose balance. I tried to unzip it while riding. My hand shook. I gave up. It was too risky. I kept both hands on the bars and focused on the climb. When I reached the top of the incline, I forced the bike forward. The road flattened out and then dipped slightly. A small downhill stretch. This was my chance. If I could gain enough speed going down, maybe I could create a larger gap. I leaned forward and let gravity help me. The tires whirred. The air rushed past my ears. My shirt flapped against my body. The bike picked up speed. I risked one quick look back. The creature was following but seemed to struggle keeping up on the downhill. It was on foot after all. Its legs had to keep pace. I pushed as hard as I could, even though my legs screamed for rest. The gap grew. I saw it fall behind by a few more feet, then a few more. I tried not to get hopeful too soon. I knew it might still catch up. But for now I had an advantage. I saw another turn in the road ahead. More trees, less open space. If I could keep the distance, maybe I could slip out of its view. Maybe I could hide somewhere if I got far enough ahead. I would try that. As I reached the turn, I decided to go off the road. I spotted a narrow path into the trees. It looked like a dirt trail. I turned off my headlamp for a moment to avoid drawing attention, but that meant I could barely see anything. I slowed down, careful not to crash into a tree. My bike rattled over roots and rocks. I moved about 20 yards into the woods and stopped behind a thick trunk. I kept my bike close. I listened. The air smelled like damp leaves and dirt. I could hear my own breath. I tried to calm down and breathe through my nose. I tried not to cough or make any noise. I waited. My legs were shaking, my arms were tense. I looked back toward the road. I could see the faint glow of the night sky through the branches. No footsteps, no breathing, nothing. After a few seconds, I heard a rustling sound. I tensed up. I gripped my handlebars. I could not see the creature. I stayed still. The rustling continued for a moment and then stopped. I waited longer. Nothing. Maybe it had passed me by. Maybe it was still looking. I felt sweat dry on my neck. My shirt stuck to my back. I decided to wait a full minute, counting in my head. I breathed slowly. When I reached 60, I quietly turned my headlamp back on, shielding it with my hand to keep the beam low. I saw the dirt path ahead. I turned the bike around carefully and started to push it back the way I had come. I moved slowly, avoiding branches. When I reached the edge of the trees, I looked out at the road. It was empty. No movement. The creature was gone. I got back on my bike and pedaled quietly along the shoulder of the road. I kept my headlamp on low. I listened for footsteps or breathing. Nothing. I forced myself to stay calm. I kept going until I reached an intersection with a better lit road. I could see some distant headlights and a sign for a gas station that might still be open. I headed that way, staying alert, glancing back every few seconds. I did not see the creature again that night. I did not know what it was or why it followed me. I just wanted to get home and lock my door. I kept riding until I reached a more familiar part of town. I stopped outside a closed store to catch my breath. My legs hurt, my throat felt raw, and my heart was still beating fast. But I was away from that thing. I rested for a moment, then got back on my bike and continued home. I did not look back again. I did not hear any strange sounds. I kept going until I reached my driveway, got off my bike, and went inside. I locked the door and sat on the floor, trying to breathe normally. I stayed awake for hours, listening for anything outside. I heard nothing. It was quiet now. Just me inside my home, safe for the moment. It started on the third night after I moved into that rented house. I was lying in bed, staring up at the ceiling, trying to settle in. It was around midnight. I heard something above my head. It sounded like steps moving slowly across the attic floor. It didn't sound like an animal or the wind. It sounded heavier, more deliberate. I stayed still, breathing through my nose, listening. The sound stopped. I lay awake for a long time. The next morning, I tried to forget about it. Maybe it was just the old wood expanding or something simple. I unpacked more boxes. I tried to focus on work and on finding my routine in the new place. But something about the sound from the night before sat in my mind all day. My name's Mark. I'm just a regular guy, renting this one-story house with an attic space that the landlord said was mostly empty. I remember asking if I could store a few things up there, and the landlord nodded and said sure, but it was dusty and small. He never mentioned anyone else having trouble here. The house looked normal enough. It had old wooden floors, a cramped kitchen, a small living room. The bathroom had old tiles but was clean. Everything seemed fine. I had moved here for a new job. I didn't know anybody in this town. The neighbors kept to themselves. So I didn't know who to ask about noises in the attic, and I didn't want to sound paranoid. The next night, I lay in bed and tried to sleep. After a few hours of tossing and turning, I heard it again. A kind of scraping sound, then something like a light footstep. I got up quietly, turned on the hall light, and stared at the attic door in the hallway ceiling. I could see that it was slightly ajar. I remembered checking it after I moved in. I was sure it was closed. I stood there for a minute, breathing slowly, trying not to make noise. I didn't feel right going up there in the middle of the night, so I made a note in my mind. In the morning, I would check it out. The next day around noon, I got the ladder I had stored in the garage and climbed up to the attic. The attic door was one of those that you push up. I pushed it all the way open and stuck my head inside. Dusty air filled my nose. It smelled like old insulation and dry wood. There wasn't much light, just a small window on the far side. The space was mostly empty. There was some old chair in a corner and a few boxes that the landlord had left. I didn't see any footprints, I didn't see any animals, I didn't see anyone. The floorboards looked stable, and I tried stepping inside to check more carefully. I found nothing unusual. I closed the attic door tight. I made sure it fit snugly. That night I still felt uneasy. I couldn't stop thinking about the door being ajar. I sat in front of the TV, ate a sandwich, tried to distract myself. Around 11, I turned off the lights and went to bed. I woke up around 2 in the morning to a thumping sound in the living room. It sounded like something fell. I got up. My heart was beating hard and my hands felt damp. I walked down the short hallway to the living room and turned on the floor lamp. A small framed photo I had placed on a shelf lay face down on the floor. It looked like it had been knocked off. But I had no pets, no wind, no vibration. I picked it up and checked the shelf. Everything else was in place. I put it back. I stood there listening. I tried to hear if anyone was breathing or moving around. Nothing. I went back to bed. Over the next few days, I started feeling watched. During the day, I tried to ignore it. I worked from home, sitting at my desk near the living room window. Sometimes, while typing, I felt a pressure on my back like eyes on me. I would turn around fast. Nothing. I would check the front door. It was locked. The windows were locked. Everything was normal. But I could sense something. At night, it got worse. Little noises in the kitchen. The cabinet door would be slightly open in the morning, even though I remembered closing it. My toothbrush would be on the sink counter, facing the opposite direction I had left it. I started doubting myself. Maybe I was just misremembering, but it felt too strange. Another night, I woke up to the sound of the TV turning on by itself. The glow of the screen lit up the hallway. I rushed out of bed and found the TV on, some random late-night show playing. I grabbed the remote and turned it off. I was shaking. I stood there in my underwear looking around, trying to see if someone had broken in. I walked through every room, checking closets under the bed behind the couch. There was no one. I didn't sleep well that night. My chest felt tight, and every little sound made me jump. A few nights later, I heard a loud clattering noise in the kitchen. I ran there and turned on the light. A pot and a pan had fallen to the floor. I remembered stacking them carefully after washing the dishes. They weren't balanced precariously. I couldn't understand how they ended up on the ground. I picked them up. The kitchen felt colder than the rest of the house. I checked the windows and the back door. Everything was locked. I started feeling a constant tension in my stomach. I tried talking to the landlord. I told him I heard noises in the attic and strange occurrences. He sounded tired on the phone and said he never had problems before. He didn't dismiss me, but he said maybe I should set some traps in the attic or call a pest control company. I tried that. I called a pest guy. He came in the afternoon, climbed up into the attic, said he saw no droppings, no signs of rodents. He left me a card and told me to call if I heard anything else. I felt foolish and alone with this problem. At night, the feeling of being watched got stronger. I sat in the living room, the TV on mute. I didn't want to draw attention, but I also didn't want total silence. I stared at the attic door in the hallway. It was closed. I got up slowly and pulled on the string to open it. I climbed the ladder with a flashlight. I scanned the attic. Nothing. Just dust and silence. I left it open that night just to see if something would move. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, waiting. Around 2 a.m, I heard a muffled bang. I got up and checked the attic. The door was still open and nothing had changed. I turned around and saw that my bedroom door, which I had left half open, was now fully closed. The window was shut, so no draft. I felt my throat tighten. I opened the bedroom door, looked around. Nothing. I decided to buy a small camera and set it up in the living room to record at night. I figured I could at least see if something was happening while I slept. I set it on a shelf opposite the couch and aimed it at the hallway that led to the attic door in the bedroom. That night, I woke up again to a noise in the kitchen. I rushed to the living room first, grabbed the camera, and checked that it was still recording. It was. Then I went to the kitchen and found that a chair had fallen over. It was an old wooden chair, and I never leave it off balance. It was just lying there. I stood it up and went back to bed, feeling sweat on my forehead, my chest heavy. In the morning, I connected the camera to my laptop and reviewed the footage. For the first hour or so, nothing. Just me turning off the lights and going to bed. Then, around 1:30 a.m., the camera's view caught a flicker in the hallway. The attic door was visible at the edge of the frame. I saw it. The door seemed to move slightly, as if something pushed it from inside. But it didn't open all the way. Then the camera froze for a second, or maybe it was just a glitch. After a moment, I saw the attic door again, but it looked still. Then I saw the bedroom door, which I had left half open. It closed slowly, very quietly, as if someone was pushing it. I couldn't see anyone. There was no shape or figure, just the door closing on its own. Then the camera shook a bit, like something touched it. and the footage ended abruptly. It was corrupted after that. I sat there looking at the partial video, my hands sweating on the keyboard. I decided to leave the house for a few hours. I went to a coffee shop, stared at my phone, and tried to think of a solution. I considered calling the police, but what would I say? That doors were moving on their own? That I heard noises in the attic? They would think I was messing around. I decided to buy some strong locks for the attic door and for the bedroom door. I also bought a motion sensor light and placed it in the hallway. I wanted to see if it would turn on during the night. That evening, I installed the locks on the attic door. I screwed in a latch that would make it harder to open from the inside. I tested it a few times, pulling on the door. It was secure. I also placed the motion sensor light near the hallway ceiling and tested it. Just passing by made it light up. I went to bed feeling a bit more in control. I left the camera recording in the living room again. I kept my phone near me. Around midnight, I heard the motion sensor light turn on in the hallway. I saw the faint glow under my bedroom door. I got up quietly and pressed my ear against the door. I didn't hear footsteps. I opened the door slowly and saw the hallway lit by the motion sensor. The attic door latch was still in place. The living room was dark, but I could see the camera's small red light. I walked toward the attic door, checking everything. I saw nothing move. The light stayed on for about a minute, then turned off. I went back to bed. 2 hours later, I woke to the sound of the TV turning on again. This time it was louder, some static noise blasting through the night. I jumped out of bed, ran to the living room, grabbed the remote, and turned it off. I checked the camera. Still recording. I looked at the attic door again. Still locked. I stood there, breathing hard. The next day, I reviewed the footage. The camera showed the hallway light up around midnight. Then a shadow passed along the wall. It was like a human shape, but I couldn't make out any details. It moved from the attic area toward the bedroom area. Then it vanished. The motion sensor light turned off. A couple hours later, the camera caught a flicker of static from the TV before it turned on fully. Right before the TV turned on, the camera image shook again. The footage ended in static this time. When I tried to fast forward, the file was corrupted. I had only a short segment saved. I felt weak and nervous. My stomach was tight. I started talking out loud in the house, saying things like, "I know you're here. I don't know what you want, but leave me alone." I didn't get a response. At night, I tried sleeping in the living room. I put a small lamp on so it wasn't completely dark. I wanted to see if anything happened while I was awake. Around 2 a.m., I felt a sudden chill. I stood up. The lamp flickered and went off. I reached for the switch. It wouldn't turn back on. I tried another lamp. Nothing. I tried the light switch on the wall. It didn't work. The whole house was dark. I pulled out my phone and turned on its flashlight. I looked at the attic door. Still locked. The silence pressed on my ears. Suddenly, I heard a low thump on the floor behind me. I spun around and saw that the remote control was on the floor. I had left it on the coffee table. It was as if someone had thrown it. I felt my heart pounding. I whispered, "Stop," even though I didn't know who or what I was talking to. I backed toward the bedroom, using my phone's light to guide me. I closed the bedroom door, locked it, and sat on the floor with my back to the wall. I stayed like that until dawn, dozing off a few times, jumping at every creak of the wood. When the sun came up, I tested the lights again. They worked fine. I went outside, got some fresh air, and sat on the porch steps. I didn't want to stay in that house. I thought about breaking the lease and leaving. I didn't have solid proof of anything, just strange recordings and personal experiences. But I knew I wasn't imagining it. I couldn't ignore the doors closing, the TV turning on, the objects moving on their own. Something was wrong with that attic, that hallway, that entire place. I went back inside, packed some clothes, and decided to sleep at a motel for a few nights. Before leaving, I checked the attic one last time. I climbed the ladder, pointed a flashlight around. Still empty. Dusty. Quiet. I closed it, locked it, and left the house. I didn't care about the rent or my belongings anymore. I just wanted to get away from that feeling of eyes on my back and that constant noise at night. At the motel, I finally relaxed. It was quiet. No strange sounds. I slept through the night without interruption. In the morning, I checked my phone. No messages from the landlord. I thought about calling him again, telling him I couldn't stay there anymore. I decided to do just that. He sighed and said he understood. He said he would come by and check the attic himself. I wished him luck and told him I'd come back for my stuff in a few days. He said that was fine. I hung up and just sat there, feeling the tension slowly leave my shoulders. I didn't know what was in that house, but I knew I wasn't going back to live in it. I could handle finding a new place. I didn't need proof or an explanation. I just needed to feel safe again. I knew I would never forget the nights in that house, the feeling of being watched, the doors closing by themselves, and the way the attic door had been opened that first time. That was enough for me. I still remember the night I noticed the light. It was around 11 and I had just turned off my TV. I was sitting in my small living room, drinking tap water out of a chipped glass. Across the street was that old apartment building. No one lived there. I had never seen anyone enter or leave. The windows were always dark even during the day. I had assumed the place was completely abandoned. That night, though, I saw a sudden glow behind one of the windows on the third floor. It was faint, but I knew it wasn't my imagination. At first, I thought maybe it was just a street light reflecting off something. I got closer to my own window and looked carefully. The light was inside that apartment behind the dirty glass. I stood there for a minute, trying to figure out what was causing it. The next night I looked again. I was curious. The building was directly across from my window, maybe 20 yards away. My apartment was on the second floor. That old place looked like it hadn't been maintained for years. The paint on the facade was peeling. The window frames were cracked. Some windows were covered with cardboard or plywood. Nobody had bothered to renovate it. I hadn't cared much before, but after seeing that light, I started paying attention. That second night, I saw nothing unusual. It was just dark and quiet. The street was empty except for a few parked cars and a dim streetlight near the corner. On the third night, I noticed something new. There was a slight flicker behind a different window on the same floor. It turned on and off a few times. I walked from my living room window to my bedroom window trying to get a better angle. The room was small, and my curtains were cheap and thin. I pressed my forehead against the glass. I could see a faint glow behind the dusty window across the street. I waited. I was calm but also confused. Who would be in there? Everyone knew that building was empty. It had been marked for demolition for a long time, but the city never got around to it. I had asked a neighbor once, and he said it was some kind of bureaucratic limbo. A few days passed. Each night I checked again. The pattern was unpredictable. Sometimes there was a light in one window. Other times there was nothing. One night I decided to watch for longer. I turned off the lights in my own place. I sat down on a wooden chair in front of the window. The chair creaked under my weight. I made sure not to make any noise. I tried not to move much, just to observe. About an hour passed. I was about to give up when I saw a clear, steady light in the same window as the first time. It stayed on for maybe a minute. Then, as I stared, I saw a figure appear. It looked like a person standing near the window, backlit by that soft glow. I couldn't see any features, just a dark shape. My heart started pounding. I felt a slight pressure in my chest. My hands gripped the sides of the chair. I didn't know what to do. I just kept looking, squinting to see if the figure would move. Suddenly, it raised an arm. It waved. It was a clear gesture. A wave directed toward me as if it knew I was watching. My stomach tightened. I felt a chill on my neck. I leaned back, not sure if I should stay or duck down, but I didn't want to lose sight of it. I stayed there watching, and the figure stayed too, arm raised, fingers spread out. At least I assumed there were fingers. It looked like a human silhouette. I couldn't see any face. After a few seconds, the light flickered and turned off. The figure disappeared into darkness. I was left staring at a blank window again. I couldn't sleep well that night. I lay in bed, thinking about what I had seen. I tried to tell myself it was some squatter or a homeless person who got in. Maybe someone looking for a place to hide. But why would they wave at me? And how did they know I was watching? My window wasn't that obvious. I decided the next day I would try to find some information. I asked the building manager of my own place if he knew anything about that old structure. He just shrugged and said nobody was allowed inside. He told me it was sealed off. I thought about calling the police, but what would I say? I saw a light and someone waved at me in an abandoned building. They would probably think I was drunk or bored. That evening I stood at my window again. I turned off my lamp to make myself less visible. I looked across the street and waited. I heard a distant car alarm somewhere in the neighborhood. A couple of people passed by on the sidewalk below, but otherwise it was quiet. About an hour into my watching, I saw a faint glow again. This time I decided to try something. I raised my own arm and waved. I felt stupid doing it, but I wanted to see what would happen. The light stayed on, and after a moment the figure appeared again. It stepped closer to the window. It raised its arm and waved back at me. My heart was beating faster. I could feel my pulse in my neck. The hair on my arm stood up. I stood there with my arm raised, not knowing what else to do. I lowered my arm and took a step back. The figure remained at the window for a few more seconds, then moved away. The light flickered and went off again. I stood there, breathing heavily. My apartment felt cold, even though the heater was on. I checked the lock on my door, just to be sure. I sat on my couch and tried to understand this. If someone was inside that abandoned building, how did they get power for a light? Maybe they had a battery-powered lamp. Maybe they snuck in through a side door. I decided to check the building from the street level the next day. I needed to see if there was any sign of forced entry. The next day, I woke up early, had some coffee, and walked across the street. I stood on the sidewalk and looked up at the windows. It was daytime, so everything looked normal. Just dirty windows and peeling paint. I walked around the corner and looked for any open doors or windows on the ground floor. I found nothing. The entrance looked boarded up. The door was locked with a thick chain. The ground-level windows had plywood nailed over them. I didn't see any footprints or anything that suggested recent entry. Everything was dusty and covered in old leaves. I shook the chain, just to test it. It was solid. That night I decided to see if the figure would appear again. Around midnight I saw the light for a brief moment. I watched carefully. The figure didn't show up immediately. I waited, leaning on the windowsill. After about 20 minutes, the light appeared in a different window on the same floor. It was dim, like a small lamp. I saw the silhouette pass by slowly. It paused and then moved out of sight. I felt a tightness in my chest again. I knew I had to try something else. I couldn't just watch forever. I needed to understand what was going on. I put on a jacket and shoes. I went outside and crossed the street. I stood in front of the building. The street was quiet. I could hear my own breathing. I pulled on the chained door. Nothing. I went around the back, stepping through an alley that smelled like garbage and old rainwater. The back door was also boarded up. I kicked at a loose piece of wood. It didn't budge. I climbed on a crate and tried to see through a high basement window. It was too dark. I couldn't see anything. I returned to my apartment feeling frustrated and uneasy. As soon as I stepped back in, I looked out my window again. The light was now off. I thought about calling the police. I picked up my phone and dialed the non-emergency number. I told them I thought I saw someone inside an abandoned building. They said they would send a patrol car when they had a unit free. I waited. About an hour later, I saw a police car drive by slowly. It shined a spotlight on the building and then moved on. The next morning, I saw nothing had changed. The chain was still on the door. There was no sign that anyone had gotten inside. Over the next few nights, the pattern continued. Sometimes there was a light. Sometimes the figure appeared and waved. Once I tried signaling with a small flashlight, turning it on and off a couple of times. The figure didn't respond to that. It just stood there. I felt a constant tension in my body. My hands were sweaty. My shoulders felt stiff. I started sleeping less. I would wake up in the middle of the night and check the window. I was always a bit afraid I'd see that figure staring directly at me. Eventually, I decided I had to get inside that building. I'm not proud of it, but I couldn't take the uncertainty anymore. I found a pry bar at a local hardware store. One night around 2 a.m., I dressed in dark clothes and walked across the street. My heart was pounding. I kept looking around, making sure no one was watching me. I went to the back door, the one with the boards. I wedged the pry bar under the edge of a loose board and pulled slowly. The wood cracked a bit. I froze, listening for any sound. The street was quiet. I tried again, pulling harder. The board came loose enough for me to slip inside. I pushed myself through the gap and found myself in a dark hallway. The air inside the building was stale. It smelled like dust and mold. My steps echoed on a bare floor. I took out my phone and used its flashlight. The hallway led to a set of stairs going up. I moved slowly, trying not to make any noise. My throat was dry. I kept swallowing, trying to keep calm. On the second floor, I saw old doors lining a corridor. They were all closed. The paint was chipping. Some door handles were missing. I heard a faint creaking sound above me. I froze and looked up. The ceiling was dark. I couldn't see anything. I continued up to the third floor. When I reached the third floor landing, my heart was beating hard. I felt sweat on my back. The hallway looked similar to the one below. I counted the doors. I tried to figure out which apartment faced my own apartment window. The building layout was simple, and I guessed it was the second door from the left. I walked up to it. The door was slightly ajar. I could see a tiny bit of light coming from inside. I pushed the door gently, holding my phone with my other hand. Inside was a small, empty living room. There was a single wooden chair in front of the window. A small, battery-powered lamp sat on the floor beside the chair. The lamp was on, casting a weak yellow light. I looked around the room. The walls were bare. The floor had dust and some scattered debris. There was no furniture except that chair and the lamp. I approached the window and looked out. I could see my own apartment building across the street. My window blinds were up. I could see my room clearly from here. My apartment looked empty and quiet. I turned around. There was no one in the room. I checked a small closet. Nothing. I listened carefully. I heard a faint scraping sound in the hallway. I rushed out, shining my phone's light down the corridor. I saw a shape at the far end. It moved around the corner. I followed it. My shoes kicked up dust. I tried to be quiet, but my breathing was loud. I reached the corner and looked around. There was nothing but another hallway with closed doors. I tried one door. It was locked. I tried another. It opened into a bare room with nothing inside. I stepped back into the hallway. Then I heard a footstep behind me. I spun around. I saw a figure at the other end, near the staircase. It was dark, just a silhouette. I could hear my own breathing, fast and shallow. I didn't say anything. I didn't know what to say. The figure stepped back around the corner and out of sight. I wanted to call out, but I couldn't bring myself to speak. I walked towards the staircase, shining my light ahead. When I turned the corner, the staircase was empty. I stood there, feeling my heart pound. I didn't know who was in here with me, and I didn't know what they wanted. I just wanted to leave. I backed away slowly, heading towards the apartment with the lamp. When I looked inside again, the lamp was off now. I hadn't heard anyone enter. I couldn't see where they might have gone. The chair was still there, facing my building. I left the apartment and moved quickly down the stairs. I kept checking behind me. I heard no one following. When I reached the ground floor, I slipped back out through the gap I made in the boards. I stood in the alley for a minute, breathing hard, my heart still racing. Then I hurried back to my apartment. I locked my door and didn't turn on any lights. I went straight to the window and looked across the street. The building was dark. No lights showed. No silhouette in the window. I watched for a long time, maybe an hour. Nothing changed. Eventually, I closed my blinds. I sat on my couch and tried to calm down. I wiped sweat from my forehead with my sleeve. I still didn't know what was going on over there. Someone had been inside that building, but I didn't see a face, didn't hear a voice. I just saw that figure and that lamp. They knew I was watching. They waved at me. They set up a lamp and a chair to face my apartment. It made no sense. In the following days, I kept checking the windows at night, but I saw no more lights. The building stayed dark. I never saw the figure again. I thought about calling the police again, but what would I tell them now? That I broke in and saw someone who disappeared? I decided to let it go. I started closing my blinds early in the evening. I stopped staring out my window at night. I tried not to think about that place anymore. I never found out who it was or what they wanted. The building is still there, empty and boarded up. I don't look at it much. It's easier that way. But sometimes, when I'm about to fall asleep, I think about that night. I can still feel the tension in my arms and chest. I can still see the shape waving at me. I can still smell the dust and mold inside those halls. I'm just glad I got out of there without any trouble. I keep my distance now, that's all I can do. I was passing under that old concrete viaduct late at night. The area smelled like damp stones and stale air. The walls were covered with chipped paint and random graffiti. There was a faint hum of distant traffic. The light was poor. A few weak bulbs spaced far apart cast uneven shadows across the ground. The pavement felt slightly gritty under my shoes, like tiny bits of glass or sand. The air was still. My jacket felt heavy on my shoulders, and my bag strap pulled at my neck. I was just trying to get home. I wanted to cross that viaduct and reach a better lit street a few blocks away. As I walked, I heard footsteps behind me. They weren't loud, just soft impacts on the concrete floor. I turned my head a bit to see if anyone was following me, but the angle was awkward and the light behind me was poor. I couldn't make out anything definite. I tried to pretend I didn't notice. I picked up my pace a little, letting my footsteps fall harder, hoping that whoever was behind me would stay back or maybe give some indication of who they were. The footsteps behind me also seemed to speed up. It was like some strange echo, except I knew it wasn't an echo. It sounded like actual footsteps belonging to someone who matched my rhythm. I felt my chest getting tight. My breathing turned shallow. I didn't want to start running. I had no reason to panic yet. Plenty of people use that viaduct as a shortcut. Maybe it was just someone who happened to be going the same way. But it felt wrong. I risked a glance over my shoulder. In the weak light, I thought I saw a figure. Tall, maybe wearing dark clothes, not moving close enough for me to see any details. Just a shape at the edge of the darkness. I decided to move faster, not a sprint, but a quick walk. My legs felt stiff. My back felt tense. I could hear my own breathing louder in my ears. The footsteps behind me sped up as well. They stayed at a constant distance. Not too far behind, not closing in too fast, just maintaining the gap. I tried to stay calm. I focused on the end of the viaduct. I could see the lighter area outside, a pale glow from a streetlight beyond the exit. I thought if I could just reach the open space, this person might back off, or at least I could see them clearly. My arm holding the bag strap started to ache. My teeth were clenched. I felt a faint trembling in my hands. The sound of those footsteps didn't stop. They matched me step for step. Every time I increased my speed, they did the same. I started sweating, even though the air was cool. The smell of the place, that damp concrete smell, seemed stronger. I tried to ignore it and pressed forward. When I was about 10 or 15 feet from the exit, I made a decision. I thought about turning around and facing whoever it was, but I was too nervous. I wanted to be in the open before I tried anything like that. I moved faster, almost jogging now. My shoes scuffed against the ground. I could feel a slight sting in my right knee, probably from the uneven ground or the way I was rushing. I saw the outside space grow wider and brighter. Then I burst out into the open. The street outside had a dim streetlight. The road surface was uneven, with small cracks and a few puddles near the edges. The sky was clear, but it was late. and I only saw a few windows lit in the buildings around. I looked around quickly. A couple of cars were parked along the curb, but no one sat inside. A few trees stood on the sidewalk, their leaves rustling a bit in a mild breeze. There were no other pedestrians around, no immediate sign of help. I turned around to check behind me. The footsteps had stopped. The sound was gone. It was suddenly silent, except for a distant car engine somewhere far away. That silence made the hair on my neck stand up. Inside the tunnel, under that viaduct, stood a figure. I could see it now more clearly because the streetlight behind me, and maybe some reflection from a nearby window, gave a better outline. The figure stood at the entrance of the viaduct, right where I had come out, just a few feet inside the darkness. He didn't move. He was facing me. I couldn't see his features. He had some kind of hood or maybe a cap that shaded his face. He looked tall, with a broad frame. His arms hung at his sides, not raised, not fidgeting. He just stood there and stared. Or at least I assumed he was staring. I couldn't see his eyes. I felt my heart pounding hard. My legs felt weak and my stomach felt tight. My throat was dry. I wanted to say something, but my voice felt trapped. I raised my hand slightly, not waving, just lifting it a bit, as if I was about to speak. The figure didn't respond. He stayed perfectly still. I heard no breathing, no movement. Nothing. Behind him, the viaduct looked darker than before, like a long black corridor that led nowhere. I stepped backward a few steps, keeping my eyes on him. I stood near the streetlight now, my shadow stretching behind me on the pavement. My foot hit a small rock or piece of debris, and I flinched at the noise. The figure still didn't move. He just stood there, as if waiting. I thought about calling out, maybe asking what he wanted, but I was afraid of provoking him. I wondered if he had followed me just to scare me, or if he wanted something more. I thought about my wallet and my phone in my pocket. I had a few bills, nothing much. I wasn't carrying anything valuable except maybe my phone. I considered if he might be a mugger, but why just stand there now, not making a move? I backed away another few steps until I reached the curb. I looked left and right. The street was empty. A few streetlights were on, but there were large gaps of darkness. I saw an intersection about 100 yards away. Maybe if I started walking that way, he wouldn't follow. Or maybe he would. I looked back toward the figure. He hadn't moved at all. That stillness made me uneasy. A normal person would say something, do something, maybe act annoyed or walk away. But he did nothing. My arms felt heavy and a little numb. My fingers tingled. I tried to steady my breathing. I took a step to the side, moving out of the direct line of the viaduct. The figure shifted slightly. I saw him tilt his head just a bit, as if to keep me in sight. It confirmed that he was watching me, not just standing randomly. I swallowed and took another step. He took a small step forward, staying right at the threshold between darkness and light. I saw a bit of the side of his face now, but it was still too dark to see details. He didn't look like he was smiling or scowling, just observing. I felt a sudden urge to call out. I thought if I talked, maybe he would talk back. "Hey," I said. My voice sounded flat and hollow. No echo out here. He didn't respond. He didn't even move. "Do you need something?" I asked. Nothing. He stood there like a statue, except I knew he could move because he had followed me. I didn't know if he had a weapon. I didn't want to find out. I looked down the street again. Still no one around. No approaching headlights, no open stores, just closed doors and the distant hum of the city. I decided to leave. I turned away and started walking down the street at a normal pace. I expected to hear footsteps again, but for a few seconds I heard nothing. I glanced back over my shoulder after about 20 steps. He was still at the entrance of the viaduct, but now he stood slightly more forward, as if testing how far I would go. The moment I turned my head forward again, I heard a scuffing sound behind me. I looked back quickly. He had taken a few more steps out into the open. Now he stood under the streetlight, and I could see him more clearly. He wore a dark jacket with the hood up. He had short hair that I could see poking out from under the hood. His face was pale and thin. He looked older than me, maybe by 10 years, but I wasn't sure. No beard, just a clean face, a sharp nose, and narrow eyes. He stared at me with a blank expression. His hands remained at his sides. He didn't say anything. I turned fully around, facing him. I wondered if he wanted me to run. If I ran, would he chase me? My legs felt stiff. I stood still, and we watched each other for a long moment. A slight breeze blew a piece of trash across the pavement between us. He tilted his head again, like he was curious. I felt my chest tighten again. My tongue felt thick. I tried again. "What do you want?" I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He parted his lips slightly as if about to speak, but no words came out. Instead, he took another step toward me. Now he was about 15 feet away. I smelled something faint on the breeze, maybe sweat or dirty fabric. I took a step back. He took another step forward. I kept moving backward. My shoulder brushed a parked car. I looked at it. It was empty. The doors were locked. I didn't want to break into anything or cause a scene. I just wanted to get out of there. But he was controlling the space now. Every time I stepped back, he stepped forward. I noticed his boots were worn, with frayed laces. He looked like someone who'd been wandering around all night. My mind raced. I had to do something. I considered running. The intersection was ahead. If I sprinted, maybe I could reach a better lit area. Maybe there would be someone out walking a dog or a late commuter heading home. Or at least I could get out of his sight. I glanced down at his hands. They were empty. No gun, no knife that I could see. But that didn't mean he wasn't dangerous. I took a deep breath and then started walking fast toward the intersection. I tried not to run outright, but I moved quickly, my shoes slapping the ground. I heard him behind me. Now his footsteps were back, matching my pace again. I looked over my shoulder. He was following me, keeping the same distance as before, about 15 feet. His face still held that blank look. It was like he had no expression at all, just staring straight at me, as if I were some object of interest. I thought about shouting for help, but I doubted anyone would hear. Most windows were dark. I saw no pedestrians. The only sound was our footsteps and a distant siren that was too far away to matter. The wind picked up slightly, making a low rustling sound in the trees. I gritted my teeth and kept moving forward. As I reached the intersection, I saw a street that looked a bit wider. There were more streetlights, a few shops with their lights off, and a bus stop bench. I saw no bus coming, and the schedule posted on the sign wouldn't help me now. I turned right and walked toward a building with a few cars parked out front. Maybe it was an apartment building. If I could just reach a door, maybe I could buzz someone or pretend I lived there and slip inside. I heard his footsteps following. I risked another quick glance. He was still behind me. Same distance, same silent stare. I said, "Back off," in a louder voice this time. He didn't react. He just kept following. My throat burned. My lower back started to ache from the tension. I felt sweat trickling down my sides. I reached a building with a small lobby. The front door was locked, of course. It had a buzzer panel. I ran up to it and pressed a random button. I waited, breathing heavily, my ear close to the speaker. Nothing but silence. I pressed another one. Still nothing. I pressed several buttons in a row. No response. He stood about 15 feet away on the sidewalk, watching me, not speaking. I turned around, keeping my back against the door. He took a step forward. I swallowed hard and said, "Look, I don't know what you want. Just leave me alone." He stood there, not moving. I realized he could close that distance anytime he wanted. I realized I had no plan. I couldn't stay trapped here. I looked to my left and right. There was a small alley beside the building. If I tried that, would he follow me in there? I didn't like the idea of going into a smaller space with him behind me. I looked across the street. There was a fence, and beyond that, a parking lot with a few cars. No one around. No sound of voices. No sound of help. I decided to keep moving. I left the building's door and continued along the sidewalk. He followed, always the same distance. I wondered if he would ever speak, or if I would ever get rid of him. My heart was still pounding. I tried to keep my breathing steady. I passed under another streetlight. I noticed that his shadow stretched on the ground behind him. He was definitely real, definitely a person, not some trick of the light. His boots scraped the pavement as he walked. After several blocks, we reached a corner with a convenience store. The store's lights were off, but there might be a back entrance or something. I approached it. The door was locked. I pulled on it anyway, rattling it, hoping maybe someone inside would hear. Nothing. I looked back. He stood a few steps away, not getting any closer than before, just waiting. I felt my legs shaking. My mouth was dry. I considered speaking again, but it felt pointless. He hadn't responded before. I walked around the building, sticking close to the wall. He followed. On the other side of the building, I found a narrow walkway leading to another street. This one had slightly better lighting. I saw a sign for a laundromat about half a block away. If the laundromat was open, maybe I could find people inside. I hurried toward it. The footsteps behind me continued at the same pace. As I approached the laundromat, I saw the lights were on. I saw movement inside through the big glass windows. My chest loosened a bit. I reached the door and pulled it open. Warm air hit my face. I smelled detergent and fabric softener. A couple of people were inside doing laundry, folding clothes, minding their own business. I stepped inside, letting the door close behind me. I took a quick look outside through the glass. The figure stopped outside on the sidewalk, just beyond the glow of the laundromat's fluorescent lights. He didn't come inside. He stood there, looking at me through the glass for a moment. I stayed near the door, breathing heavily, trying to calm down. He stared for a few seconds, then he stepped back into the darkness. I watched him go until I couldn't see him anymore. I waited, heart still pounding, until I felt safe enough to move away from the door. I didn't know where he went. I just knew he wasn't there right now. I stayed in that laundromat for a while, sitting on a plastic chair, catching my breath, my hands still shaking a bit. I felt sweat drying on my forehead. The people inside barely glanced at me. I didn't tell them what happened. I didn't know how to explain it without sounding strange. After some time, I thought about leaving, maybe taking a different route home, staying on main streets, well-lit areas, anywhere but under a dark viaduct. I didn't know who that figure was or what he wanted, but I felt relieved that I'd gotten away from him. I stood up, adjusted my bag strap, and stepped outside again, looking both ways before I moved. He was gone. I left work later than usual and decided to cut through the park on my way home to save a few minutes. It was around 9 at night. The sky was dark, but the park had enough streetlights so I could see the path ahead. My apartment building was on the other side. Normally, I would have walked around on the main streets where there were more people, but I was tired and wanted to get home quickly. The park wasn't completely empty. I saw a couple in the distance near a bench and a man jogging with headphones near the entrance. After that, I didn't see anyone else close by. The air smelled like wet grass because it had rained earlier. I heard the rustle of leaves under my shoes and the low hum of distant traffic. Nothing unusual. About halfway through, I heard quick footsteps behind me. They sounded clear and a bit sharp, like hard soles hitting the asphalt path. I turned around. I expected to see someone walking or running. The path behind me was lit by a streetlight about 20 feet back. There was nobody there. I thought maybe the sound came from somewhere else. Maybe it was just an echo of my own footsteps. I listened carefully and started walking again. After a few steps, I heard it again. A rapid tapping sound behind me. It felt like it matched the speed of my own steps. I stopped moving and listened. The steps stopped. I looked over my shoulder again, squinting and leaning forward a bit. I still didn't see anyone. The benches were empty. The trees and bushes were still. and the path behind me was clear. I looked up, thinking maybe there was a branch falling or some animal scurrying along the ground. But I didn't see anything like that. The footsteps sounded too human, too distinct to be an animal. I started moving again, a bit slower this time, trying not to make much noise. Almost immediately I heard the same footsteps behind me. They sounded like they were about the same distance away each time. It was as if someone was following me but keeping a careful distance. My heart started to pound in my chest. I felt a sudden tightness in my stomach. I tried to swallow, but my throat felt dry. I didn't want to run yet. I thought maybe I was imagining it, or maybe I had passed by someone who was now behind me but out of my sight. I decided to change direction. Instead of following the main path, I took a left turn onto a smaller path that curved around a group of tall bushes. As I turned, I listened for those footsteps. They changed direction too. The sound followed my turn. Now I was sure something was off. I stopped again. No footsteps. I took a single step forward. One step sounded behind me. I stopped. The steps stopped. I took 2 steps. 2 steps sounded behind me. I spun around quickly, walking backward. The path behind me was lit by a lamp, and I could see the ground and the space between the benches and trees. Nothing. No one. I felt my breathing get heavier. I could feel a slight sweat forming on my forehead and on my palms. I wiped my hands on my pants and tried to calm down. I decided to try something else. I stepped onto the grass beside the path, hoping the footsteps wouldn't follow on the grass if they were just an echo. I took 3 steps on the grass, moving slowly. I heard 3 clear steps behind me, still sounding like hard shoes on asphalt even though I was no longer walking on the asphalt path. I glanced down at my own shoes. I was wearing sneakers with soft soles, not hard shoes. The sound didn't match my own footsteps at all. I wasn't making that sound. Something else was. My mind raced. I considered calling out, asking who was there, but I didn't want to show fear. Instead, I pulled out my phone. I tapped the screen to check my signal. It was weak, but I had 1 or 2 bars. I thought about calling someone, maybe a friend who lived nearby, but I didn't want to stand still. The idea of standing still in the dark, in the middle of the park, made me feel vulnerable. I kept walking, turning left and right, trying to confuse whoever was behind me. The footsteps always matched my movement. I walked faster. The footsteps also sped up. I slowed down, and they slowed down. I tried a sudden jump forward to catch whoever it was off guard. I jumped forward 3 steps and spun around quickly, hoping to see them move into the light. There was no one. The path was empty. The grass was empty. The benches were empty. I looked up at the trees. The branches swayed a little from a light breeze, but there was no one hiding there. I felt a chill run through my arms and up my neck. My mouth felt dry. I tried to clear my throat, but it just made a raspy sound. My legs felt tense. I flexed my hands, trying to control my breathing. I took a deep breath and decided to do something more direct. I spoke loudly. "Hey, I know you're there." My voice sounded shaky to me. I waited. No response. No footsteps at that moment because I was standing still. Just silence. The couple I had seen earlier was too far away by now. The jogger was gone. I didn't see anyone else. I tried to think of a reason for these noises. Maybe it was some kind of prank. Maybe there were hidden speakers. Maybe someone was messing with me. But that idea didn't make sense. The footsteps responded to my every movement. If I stepped twice, they stepped twice. If I paused, they paused. Whoever or whatever it was reacting instantly to me. That kind of prank would be complicated. My hand holding the phone was shaking a bit. I pressed the side of the phone against my leg to steady it. I decided to leave the park as soon as possible. The exit I usually took was straight ahead and then to the right. It would take about 5 more minutes walking fast. I walked forward again, this time without stopping. The footsteps followed. They stayed behind me at the same distance. Every time I increased my pace, they matched it. Every time I slowed down, they slowed down. I tried to run a bit, not a full sprint, just a quick jog. I heard the footsteps jog behind me. They weren't heavy or soft. They were medium in volume, like normal footsteps, but I couldn't see anyone making them. I felt my chest tighten again. I looked to the sides for anyone who might be doing this. Maybe someone was mimicking my footsteps but staying hidden behind a tree or a bush. But to remain hidden so well, they would need to run from cover to cover. I would have seen movement. The park was not that dense. There were open spaces between the trees, and the bushes weren't tall enough to hide a person running. I reached a small wooden bridge that crossed over a narrow stream. I stopped at the start of the bridge and turned around again. Nothing. The path behind me was empty. I listened carefully. I stepped onto the wooden planks of the bridge. The footsteps sounded right behind me, also on wood. I turned quickly. Empty bridge. Empty path. I looked down through the gaps in the bridge. The stream was dark, but I could see the reflection of the lamps. No one was under the bridge. I felt sweat on my back. My shirt was sticking to my skin. I realized that standing around wasn't helping. I pushed forward, crossing the bridge and moving toward the exit of the park. The footsteps never stopped. I tried walking in a zigzag pattern on the path. The footsteps matched my every turn. I stepped off the path onto the grass and back onto the path. The footsteps stayed right behind me, always sounding like they were a few feet behind, never closer, never farther. It was like they were attached to me. I tried talking again, this time louder. "What do you want?" My voice echoed a bit among the trees. I heard the distant noise of a passing car on a nearby street. No reply. I considered calling the police, but what would I say? That I heard footsteps and nobody was there? They might send someone, but by the time they arrived, maybe the sound would be gone. Also, I wasn't in immediate danger as far as I could tell. The footsteps never tried to touch me or attack me, but I didn't feel safe. I passed a trash can and a lamp. The park gate was not far. I could see the streetlights outside the park. I focused on reaching that gate. I tightened my grip on my phone and walked faster. The footsteps followed right behind. My throat felt sore from the tension. I kept my eyes forward because looking back did nothing. Every time I looked, I saw nothing. It was just empty space and the sound of steps that didn't belong to any visible person. When I finally reached the park gate, I stepped onto the sidewalk outside the park. At that moment, I noticed something strange. The footsteps did not continue on the concrete sidewalk outside the park. I stood there for a moment, watching the park behind me. There was no one there. I took a step on the sidewalk. Only my own step echoed. I took another step. Just me. There were no more mysterious footsteps. I didn't relax right away. I looked around. The street outside had a few people in the distance. A car passed by. Two men walked on the opposite sidewalk talking to each other. They looked normal. I heard their voices. I heard their footsteps. They matched their bodies and their shoes. I looked back at the park gate. The park looked empty behind me, at least in the area where I came from. The lampposts lit the asphalt path, the benches, the trash cans, and the small bridge. Nothing else moved. I felt the tension leaving my shoulders slowly, but I was still on edge. I took a deep breath and wiped sweat from my forehead. I stood near a lamp on the sidewalk outside the park for a minute or two, checking my surroundings. No suspicious people. No weird sounds. My phone still had weak signal, so I walked a bit farther along the street until I got a better signal. Then I called a friend. I kept my voice low. I said I had a strange experience and just wanted to talk to someone until I got home. I didn't give details. I just said I felt creeped out in the park. My friend asked if I wanted him to pick me up, but I said I was fine. Just wanted to hear a familiar voice. As I walked home along the sidewalk, I kept glancing back over my shoulder. I didn't hear those footsteps anymore. I only heard occasional cars, distant voices, and the normal sounds of the city at night. When I finally reached my apartment building, I felt relieved. The lobby was quiet. The elevator was empty. In the hallway, I didn't hear anything strange. In my apartment, I locked the door, checked the windows, and turned on some lights. I stood in the middle of my living room and tried to understand what had happened. I sat on the edge of my couch. My legs felt a bit shaky. I rubbed my eyes and leaned forward, elbows on my knees. I tried to replay the events in my head, but I couldn't find a rational explanation. There were footsteps behind me that reacted to my movements, and I never saw who made them. I considered that maybe I had been tired, maybe I had misheard something. But I knew what I heard. It was too clear. It wasn't random noises. It matched every step I took. I decided to leave it alone for the night. I took a shower, trying not to think too much about it. I focused on the hot water hitting my neck and back. Then I dried off, put on clean clothes, and sat in the living room again. I turned on the TV, keeping the volume low. I tried to watch something ordinary to calm myself down. A news channel with some late-night report about traffic conditions was on. I let the voices of the newscasters fill the room. Eventually, I felt more relaxed. But my mind kept jumping back to the memory of those footsteps. I considered going back to the park the next day, maybe during daylight, to check if there was something unusual about the path or maybe a hidden speaker. But it was late, and I didn't want to deal with that right now. I just wanted to sleep, to let my mind rest. Before going to bed, I double-checked the front door and windows. Everything was locked. I turned off the lights and climbed into bed. I stared at the ceiling for a while. There were no strange sounds in my apartment, just the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen and the distant muffled sounds of the city through the walls. I felt safe there. Still, I couldn't completely shake off the memory of walking through that park with those invisible footsteps behind me. I knew I would think about it again tomorrow. For now, I just wanted to lie down and rest. It had been a long day, and I needed to sleep. I closed my eyes, taking slow breaths, waiting for my body to relax completely. Over time, my heartbeat slowed, and the tight feeling in my chest eased. I focused on the quiet sounds around me. Nothing strange, just normal apartment noises. I drifted off, not sure what to make of what I experienced, but at least I was home and safe. That was enough for that night. I woke up on a Monday morning and saw 3 missed calls on my phone. All of them came around 3 a.m. I had my phone on silent mode because I don't like being disturbed when I'm sleeping. I remember sitting up in bed and staring at the screen. My room was dark. I had the curtain closed. I could see a bit of light from the street lamp outside shining through a small gap in the fabric. I checked the caller ID, but it said, "Unknown number." I tried calling back, but there was no answer. I felt a slight irritation, but I didn't think much of it. It was just some spam call, I told myself, or maybe a wrong number. I got out of bed, took a quick shower, and got dressed. I prepared some coffee in the kitchen and drank it in silence. My apartment was small and quiet. I had a bedroom, a living room connected to a tiny kitchen and a bathroom. Nothing special. After my coffee, I left for work. I work in a small office in town handling data entry and some customer service stuff. It's not an exciting job, but it pays the bills. All day I didn't think about the call much. When I came home that night, I ate something simple, watched some TV, and went to bed around midnight. The next morning, Tuesday, I woke up again to missed calls. 2 missed calls at 3 a.m. Again, the same unknown number. Now I felt a little uneasy. It was odd. 2 nights in a row, always at 3 a.m. I checked the time on my phone's log. The calls were only a few seconds apart. I tried calling back again, but there was no answer. There was no voicemail either. I tried to ignore it, but during the day at work, I kept thinking about it. Why would someone call me at 3 a.m. and not say anything? I considered blocking unknown numbers, but I also felt curious. Maybe someone I know got a new phone. But who would do that in the middle of the night? That night I made sure my phone's ringer was on but low. I wanted to see if I would wake up during the call. I went to bed around 11. My sleep was normal until I rolled over and checked my phone in the morning. Once again, I had a missed call at 3 a.m., just one this time. My ringer was on, but I slept right through it. That bothered me. I'm not a heavy sleeper. Usually, if the phone rings, I hear it. But I didn't hear a thing. The call history said the call lasted a few seconds before ending. Unknown number, 3 a.m. exactly. On Thursday night, I decided to stay awake until 3 a.m. I wanted to see what would happen if I picked up. I drank coffee around midnight and turned on the TV. I sat on the couch with my phone next to me on the coffee table. I watched some boring late-night shows, keeping the volume low. Around 2:50 a.m., I started feeling nervous. I stared at my phone screen, waiting for something to happen. My heart was beating a bit faster than normal. I didn't like the feeling. It reminded me of waiting for a test result, or waiting for someone you don't want to see. Then, at 3 a.m. on the dot, my phone rang. The sound was louder than I expected, even though I had left it on a low volume. I picked it up right away. I pressed the answer button and brought the phone to my ear. I didn't say anything at first. I listened. There was static, the kind of static you hear when there's no clear signal. Under the static, I heard something else. A whisper. I couldn't make out the words at first. I said, "Hello?" into the phone. The whisper paused. Then I heard it more clearly. "I can see you." It was a rough voice, like someone speaking very softly through clenched teeth. I froze and didn't say anything. The line went dead. My mouth felt dry. I stood up from the couch and looked around my apartment. The lights were off except for the TV. I rushed to the window and looked outside. The street was empty. There was no one at the bus stop across the street. No cars parked nearby that looked suspicious. I closed the curtain and made sure the door was locked. I felt my heart pounding. I tried to think logically. Maybe it was some kind of prank. Maybe a friend trying to scare me. But I don't have many friends, and none of them would do this. Also, the voice sounded unfamiliar. It wasn't a recorded message. It reacted to me when I said hello. I tried to go to sleep, but I kept thinking about the call. In the morning, I felt tired and shaky. I considered ignoring it, but I knew I wouldn't feel right until I did something. At work, I used my break to call my phone carrier. I asked if they could trace the call. The operator said that without an official request from the authorities, they couldn't do much. They recommended blocking unknown calls. I hung up feeling frustrated. That evening, I put my phone on silent and tried to sleep. I wanted to forget about it, but deep down, I knew it wouldn't end. At 3 a.m., I woke up in a panic. My phone was vibrating on the bedside table. I didn't pick it up this time. I just stared at it until it stopped. I waited a minute and then checked. Unknown number. I breathed fast and wiped sweat off my forehead. I tried to go back to sleep, but I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined someone standing outside my window whispering into a phone. The next day, I decided to do something else. I tried changing my phone number. I contacted the carrier, and after some hassle, got a new number. I told myself that would fix it. It's just a number. If someone doesn't have it, they can't call me, right? I went to bed relieved. But at 3 a.m., I woke up to my phone ringing again. Unknown number. I answered, feeling anger in my chest. "Who the hell is this?" I whispered into the phone. Static, then the same whisper. "I can see you." I cursed and hung up. I tried to call back. Nothing. The number was hidden. I stayed up until morning, pacing around my apartment, checking the locks, peeking through the peephole, looking through the blinds. I saw nothing unusual. The hallway was empty. The street was quiet. I started feeling nervous in my own home. At night, I turned on more lights. I slept with the TV on for background noise. I checked every corner of my apartment before going to bed. I looked under the bed, behind the couch, inside the closet. I found nothing strange. Still, the calls kept coming. Every night at 3 a.m., the same unknown number. If I answered, I heard static and the whisper saying, "I can see you." If I didn't answer, the call ended after a few rings. After a week of this, I felt exhausted. My eyes had dark circles under them. I jumped at small sounds like the refrigerator humming or the pipes creaking. I tried calling the police. They asked if I had received threats. I told them about the calls. They said since there was no direct threat besides, "I can see you," and no sign of a crime. They couldn't do much. They told me to block the number or get a new phone. I told them I already changed my number. They said maybe someone hacked my phone. They didn't seem interested. I bought a new phone. A different brand, a different carrier, a different SIM card. I gave the new number only to my boss and my mother. I told no one else. I did everything I could think of to ensure nobody had this new number. I went to bed that night feeling a tiny bit hopeful. Maybe the calls would stop. But at 3 a.m. the phone rang. I answered right away. "What do you want?" "Static, then. I can see you." I felt a jolt in my chest. I got up, opened the door, and stepped into the hallway of my apartment building. The lights were dim and flickering. I walked down the hall, trying to listen for any sound. My bare feet felt cold on the floor. I put my ear against my neighbor's door. Silence. I went down the stairs and checked the building's entrance. The door was locked. I looked through the glass at the empty street outside. No one was there. I went back to my apartment and pushed a chair against the door. I checked every window. They were locked. I could see the glow of the street lamp through the blinds. I stared at it for a while. Nothing moved outside. I felt like I was going crazy. Who could be doing this? How did they get my number again? How did they know where I was or what I was doing? The next night I decided to try something different. I turned off all the lights and sat in front of the window at 2:50 a.m. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't drink coffee. I just sat there, phone in my hand, looking out through a small gap in the curtain. I wanted to see if someone was outside calling me. At 3 a.m. the phone rang. I answered it without taking my eyes off the street. "I can see you," the voice whispered. I looked carefully at everything outside. The sidewalk was empty. No parked cars. No movement at all. I felt my hands shaking. I gripped the phone tightly. I said, "Where are you?" Silence, then static. The call ended. I kept watching. Nothing changed outside. I waited for an hour, just staring. No one appeared. I finally gave up and went to bed. My head was pounding, and my stomach felt uneasy. The following night, I tried recording the call. I set up my old phone to record the audio through its microphone. At 3 a.m. the call came. I answered and placed it on speaker. Static, then the whisper, "I can see you." I stayed silent. I tried to keep the call going by not hanging up. I said, "What do you want?" No response. The whisper didn't repeat itself. The static continued for a few seconds, then the call ended. I stopped the recording and played it back. The static was there. The whisper was there. I couldn't identify the voice. I tried showing it to a coworker the next day, asking if they recognized the voice. They just said it sounded like someone messing with me. That didn't help. My apartment started to feel uncomfortable. I put more locks on my door. I sealed the windows with thicker curtains. I started sleeping with a kitchen knife on my bedside table. I left the TV on all night for noise. The call still came at 3 a.m. I thought about going to a hotel, but I realized it wouldn't help. The caller had my number. They would call wherever I went. I tried turning my phone off before 3 a.m. When I turned it on in the morning, I had no missed calls. But the next night when I turned it off, the same happened. No missed calls. I started sleeping with my phone off, thinking maybe this would give me some peace. But that only gave me temporary relief. I knew the moment I turned it back on, the calls could start again. After a couple of days, I started leaving my phone off all night and turning it on late in the morning. I tried to relax. I tried to pretend nothing was happening. But I noticed something strange. One night, around 2:30 a.m., I woke up to use the bathroom. As I passed my living room window, I thought I saw a shape outside on the sidewalk. I stepped closer and looked through a tiny gap in the curtain. It was dark, but I saw a figure standing near the lamppost. I couldn't see any details, just the outline of a person. I froze and watched. The figure stood still for a minute, then walked away down the street. I waited a few minutes, then went to check the street from another window. It was empty again. I tried to tell myself it was just a random person walking home late at night, but it bothered me. The next morning, I turned on my phone. No missed calls. That night, I turned my phone off again. I couldn't bring myself to turn it on at 3 a.m. I was too scared. I just lay in bed listening for any sound outside. I heard nothing unusual, just the low hum of traffic in the distance. On the following night, I finally turned on my phone at 2:50 a.m. I wanted to face it again. I sat in my living room, all the lights off, peeking through the curtain. At 3 a.m., the phone rang. I answered. Static, then the whisper, "I can see you." I looked outside and saw no one. I said nothing. I held my breath. After a few seconds, the static ended, and the line went dead. I lowered the phone and watched the street. After a few minutes, a figure came into view under the street lamp. They stood there for about 30 seconds. I couldn't see their face or clothing details. It was too dark. Then they walked away, disappearing into the shadows. I stayed up until sunrise, staring at that spot. Nothing happened again that night. When morning came, I showered, got dressed, and left for work like usual. At my desk, I felt drained. I didn't know what to do next. I tried looking up similar cases online. I found nothing helpful. I considered changing apartments, but that wouldn't guarantee anything. The caller had proven that changing my number and phone didn't help. Besides, moving costs money and time. For now, I still get these calls at 3 a.m. if I leave my phone on. I still hear that whisper. I still sometimes see the figure outside at night. I don't know who it is or what they want. They never show their face. They never say anything besides, "I can see you." I've stopped trying to reason with it. I just try to manage my fear by keeping my phone off. Sometimes I slip and turn it on at night and the call comes again. The figure appears again. I can't explain it. I have no proof except a strange audio recording in my own eyes. I haven't told anyone else except that one coworker. They didn't believe me. The police won't help. My carrier can't help. I have no plan. I just live with it. Every night at around 2:50 a.m., I feel my heartbeat rise. I feel sweat on my palms. I wonder if I should face it again or hide. Usually I hide. I keep the phone off. But sometimes I turn it on just to see if something changes. Nothing changes. The call comes. The whisper repeats the same words. And the figure appears outside. This is my life now. I don't know how it ends. I just know that at 3 a.m. my phone always rings. I found the mirror on a Sunday afternoon at a flea market on the edge of town. I had gone there to look for some old tools or maybe a cheap coffee table. Instead, I saw this mirror leaning against a pile of broken chairs and stained cushions. Its frame had simple carvings along the edges, not very deep or detailed, just a few lines that looked hand-cut. It wasn't a large mirror, maybe 3 feet tall and 2 feet wide. The glass looked old but clear enough. The seller asked for a low price. I didn't even try to haggle. I took it, brought it home, and placed it in the hallway outside my bedroom. I live alone in a small house with narrow halls and worn-out carpets. I don't have a lot of furniture. The hallway walls are plain white with old paint that I keep meaning to redo. There's a single overhead light that buzzes faintly. I put the mirror on a small side table, propped it against the wall, and left it there. I didn't pay much attention to it during the day. It just stood there, reflecting the opposite wall and the light fixture. Nothing unusual. That first night, I was walking down the hall on my way to the bathroom. It was late, maybe past midnight. I was tired, half asleep. The overhead light was off, but there was a small nightlight plugged into an outlet down near the floor. It gave off a weak, yellowish light. As I passed by, I glanced at the mirror. I saw my shape in it, just a dim outline. But in the background of the reflection, I thought I saw something move. It was just a quick flicker of shadow. I stopped and looked behind me. Nothing was there. I figured it must have been my own shadow or a trick of the weak light. I shrugged and continued to the bathroom. The next evening, When I passed by the mirror again at night, I noticed something else. I was just walking through the hall, heading to the kitchen. The house was quiet. I looked into the mirror and saw what looked like a slight change in the background. It didn't show just the hall anymore. It's hard to explain, but the reflection seemed to have a darker corner that didn't line up with the real hallway. The actual hallway has a door leading to a closet on that side, but the mirror's reflection made it look like there was an open space going further back. I stared at it for a few seconds. I turned my head slowly and looked around. The hall didn't have any extra space, it was just a wall and a closed closet door. But in the mirror, I saw a vague shape moving in that dark corner. It looked like a human shape, but not detailed. It was more like a shifting shadow. I felt a tightness in my stomach and a prickling on my scalp. My mouth went dry. I stepped closer to the mirror and reached out, almost touching the glass. The image flickered, and then it was gone, replaced by a normal reflection of me in the hall. I breathed out and cursed under my breath. I tried to ignore it, but over the next few nights it got worse. Each night after the sun went down, whenever I passed that mirror, I would see things in it that didn't match my house. Sometimes I saw shadows where there should only be white walls. Sometimes I saw movement in the corner of the reflection, like someone was walking in a place that didn't exist. I stood there for a while once, trying to catch a clear look, but the moment I focused, it snapped back to normal. It only happened when I was passing by casually, not when I tried to study it directly. I started turning on all the lights in the house at night, just to make sure I saw everything clearly. But that didn't help. One evening, I stood in front of the mirror with the hallway light on and stared. For a few seconds, it reflected me and the hall normally. Then I blinked, and for a brief moment I saw myself standing in a different hall. The background behind me in the reflection wasn't my house. It looked like a hallway with darker walls, maybe wood panels or something old. The lighting in that reflected space was dim and uneven, like it came from a candle or a weak bulb. I tried to step back, but my legs felt stiff. I forced myself to look away, and when I looked again, it was just my normal hallway. After that, I felt uneasy all the time. I felt it during the day too, not just at night. I would walk past the mirror in the morning, and although I didn't see anything strange then, I couldn't forget what happened. I tried moving the mirror. I carried it into the living room and leaned it against the sofa. I thought maybe the hallway's lighting or arrangement was playing tricks on my eyes. But the first night I passed it in the living room, I saw something again. I saw my reflection, but my reflection's eyes were looking somewhere else, not straight at me. They were looking past me, as if at something behind me on the left. I turned around fast, but there was nothing. When I looked back at the mirror, my reflection's eyes were back to normal. I tried to tell myself I was imagining it, maybe I was tired. I cleaned the mirror's surface with glass cleaner. I inspected the back of it, looking for any strange film or two-way glass. It was just old wood and a piece of mirror glass. I tried tapping it, listening for hollow spots. It sounded solid. I placed it back in the hallway because I didn't know where else to put it. It didn't seem right in the living room, and I figured I was overreacting. A few nights later, I woke up thirsty. It was around 2 a.m. I got out of bed and headed to the kitchen for a glass of water. The hallway was dark. I passed the mirror and did my best not to look at it, but I couldn't help a quick glance. I saw a shape again, a tall, dark outline standing behind me. I froze. I looked at the mirror carefully. My reflection stood there, but right behind my reflected shoulder there was a dark figure. It didn't have clear features, it just looked like a person standing very close, almost pressed against my back. I didn't feel anything behind me in reality. No breath, no sound. But in the mirror that shape was there, and I could see it move slightly as if shifting weight from one foot to the other. I felt sweat trickling down my neck. My heart was pounding. I reached behind me with my hand, feeling the empty air. Nothing. I stood like that for maybe 10 seconds, and then the figure in the mirror disappeared. My reflection was alone again. I didn't sleep well after that. I thought about getting rid of the mirror. I considered throwing it out, but I hesitated. Part of me was scared that if I got rid of it, something else would happen. I don't know why I thought that. I guess I just didn't want to disturb whatever was going on. So I left it there. The next night I tried a small test. I stood in front of the mirror and raised my right hand. My reflection did the same. I stepped to the side. It followed. I crouched, stood up. Everything matched. Then I tried something else. I forced myself to look serious, keeping my face neutral. I stood still, watching my expression. For a moment, everything matched perfectly. Then, as I stared at my face, I saw the corners of my reflection's mouth curl upward. It was subtle at first, just a slight movement. My real face was not smiling, but the reflection's face began to form a grin. It was a thin, unnatural smile. I felt my breath catch. I reached up and touched my own face. My lips were pressed together, not moving. The reflection's smile grew wider. It didn't look right. The muscles in my reflection's face didn't move the way a normal face would. It was as if the image was distorting slightly. I stepped back and bumped into the wall. My legs felt shaky. I looked away for a second to steady myself. When I looked back, the reflection was normal again. My body reacted with quick, shallow breathing. I couldn't calm down. I felt my skin tingling and my heart pounding. I went straight to bed, leaving the hallway light on. I didn't sleep much. The next morning, I took the mirror down and carried it into the garage. The garage was dusty and smelled like old cardboard. I leaned the mirror face in against a shelf so I wouldn't have to look at it. I left it there and went about my day, trying to forget about it. I went to work, came back, ate a simple dinner, watched some TV. I avoided going into the garage. It was quiet that night. I slept better, knowing the mirror wasn't in my hallway. But after a couple of days, I got curious. I wondered if maybe the lighting in the hallway had created some kind of optical illusion. Maybe the old glass was warped. Maybe I was tired and seeing things. I decided to check the mirror again. I went to the garage in the late afternoon. The sun was still out, bright and steady, shining through the small window. I turned the mirror around and looked at it. In full daylight, it seemed normal. I could see my face, my clothes, the garage behind me. No weird shadows, no strange smiles, nothing out of place. That night, I brought the mirror back into the house and placed it in a different spot, this time in the spare bedroom. This bedroom is mostly empty, just a bed frame, a lamp, and a small dresser. I put the mirror on the floor against the wall and left the door open. I made sure the lamp was on when I came by to check it. I stood there and looked at myself in the reflection. I tried changing my expression, raising my eyebrows and shaking my head. Everything matched. Just a normal reflection. I felt relieved. But as I was leaving the room, I turned back for one last look. I stood half in the doorway, leaning back to peek at the mirror. For a split second, I saw something else again. This time, I wasn't even fully in front of it. I was at an angle, but I could see that my reflection's head had turned slightly to watch me as I left. I was sure I had turned my head back straight ahead toward the hallway, but the reflection seemed delayed, as if it took a moment longer to move. By the time I stepped fully back into the room, it was normal again. My reflection moved in sync with me, no delays. My throat felt tight. I decided to cover the mirror that night. I grabbed an old sheet from the closet and threw it over the frame. I went to bed feeling tense. My stomach churned a bit. I couldn't focus on anything else. I just lay there, feeling my heart beat against my pillow. In the morning, I tried something else. I brought the mirror out into the backyard. I leaned it against the fence and looked at it under the bright sunlight. It showed me the yard, the fence, and the trees beyond. Everything seemed normal again. No odd movements, no strange smiles. That night, I left it outside. It didn't rain, so I figured it was fine. Before going to bed, I went out with a flashlight and looked at it. The reflection showed my backyard under the flashlight beam. I didn't see anything unusual. I went back in, feeling a bit calmer. The next day, I brought it inside again. I placed it in the hallway one more time. I wanted to be sure I wasn't losing my mind. Maybe the strange things had stopped. Maybe it was just stress before. After dinner, I turned off most of the lights and passed by the mirror again. I forced myself to look at it directly. I saw my face and my eyes. They seemed normal. I stood still for a while, waiting. Nothing happened. I sighed with relief and stepped closer. I moved my arm slowly. The reflection did the same. No delays. I smiled a little, testing it. My reflection smiled back, matching me perfectly. I decided to try the neutral face test again. I relaxed my face, keeping my mouth closed and my eyes calm. I stared at my reflection. I counted the seconds in my head. 1, 2, 3. At 5 seconds, my reflection's face changed. Its eyes narrowed slightly and the lips pulled back just enough to show teeth. My real face remained neutral. I felt my stomach drop and my heart pick up speed. I didn't move. I saw the reflection's teeth more clearly now. They looked like my teeth, but the way they were shown felt forced, like someone pretending to smile without feeling it. I took a step backward. My real mouth was shut, but the reflection's mouth hung slightly open now. I couldn't stand it anymore. I spun around and walked away fast. My legs felt weak and my hands were shaking. I decided to get rid of the mirror for good. I didn't care if it was valuable or not. I didn't want it in my house. The next morning, I wrapped it in an old blanket and put it in my car's trunk. I drove across town and found a small thrift store. I donated it. They didn't ask many questions. I left before they could change their minds. I didn't want to know what would happen to the next person who owned it. I just wanted it gone. No one got hurt and I didn't hear any news about it afterward. Now my hallway is empty where the mirror used to stand. At night, I still feel a bit uneasy when I walk through there. I sometimes glance at the spot where it stood, expecting to see something move. But there's nothing now. Just a blank wall and a faint buzz from the overhead light. I sleep better without that mirror in the house. I don't know what was wrong with it and I don't care. I'm just glad it's gone. I first noticed something was off around 2 in the morning. I was lying in bed, awake because the noise of old pipes kept me up. I live on the 4th floor of an old building. It's a place with chipped paint in the hallways, dim lights in the stairwell, and an elevator that shakes. The walls are thin. I can usually hear my neighbor's TV or the sound of footsteps coming from above. But that night, it was quieter than usual. No footsteps. No distant voices, just that dull creak of the pipes. Then the intercom buzzed. I got up, walked into the small living room, and stared at the device on the wall. It was old and yellowed. The buzzer sounded again. I pressed the button and said my name. There was no immediate response, just a sort of muffled breathing. Then I heard my name spoken back to me, slowly and softly. My heart started pounding. I tried to see who it was through the small camera monitor. The image on the monitor was grainy and dark, but I could see the front entrance. The light above the door was on, but no one stood there. The door was closed. I said, "Who's there?" The voice didn't respond. It just repeated my name 3 times, each time quieter. After that, the line went silent. I let go of the button and listened. Nothing else happened that night. Still, I barely slept. The next day, I went downstairs and checked the lobby. I looked outside through the glass door. There was nothing unusual. I checked the mailbox area and spoke briefly with the building manager, a man named Julio. He's always half asleep behind a small counter. He said he didn't see anyone last night. I asked if someone could have sneaked in. He said he doubted it. The door locks automatically, and to enter you need a key or someone to buzz you in. He hadn't heard anything, and there's no doorman or security guard. Julio leaves around 10 at night. After that, the lobby stays empty, just a locked door and the intercom system. I went back up to my apartment and tried to forget about it. That night it happened again, around the same time. The buzzer sounded, that sharp sound that cuts through silence. I turned on the light in the living room and walked straight to the intercom. I pressed the button and heard the same muffled breathing. Then my name. It sounded a bit distorted, like someone speaking through a piece of cloth. The camera again showed no one outside. I stared at the monitor. It was a static image of the empty entrance. I asked who it was. The voice just kept repeating my name at uneven intervals, sometimes whispering it, sometimes saying it a bit louder. It gave me chills. I asked if they needed help, but I got no answer. After a minute or so, the sound stopped again. I stood there with my finger on the button, listening to the faint hum of the line. When I released the button, the silence in my apartment felt heavy. By the third night, I decided to record the calls. I took out my phone, set it to record, and waited. When the buzzer sounded again, I was ready. This time, I didn't speak first. I picked up the intercom's handset instead of pressing the button on the panel. I did that because sometimes picking up the handset improved the audio quality. I held my phone close. I heard the same breathing, the same soft voice saying my name. No other words. I asked who it was and got no response. It was the same pattern. After a few repetitions, the call ended. I saved the recording and tried not to think about it too much. I went back to bed, leaving a small lamp on in the corner of the room. I had a hard time sleeping. My chest felt tight, and I kept glancing at the closed door of my apartment. I thought about calling someone, but who would I call at that hour for something like this? The next morning I listened to the recording. It sounded the same as I remembered. A few seconds of silence, the sound of my own breathing, then the stranger's quiet voice. But as I replayed it, I noticed something else. In between the repetitions of my name, there were faint whispers. They were soft and hard to make out. I put my earphones in and turned the volume up. Beneath the voice that kept saying my name, I could hear other voices. They were lower, more distant. I couldn't understand what they were saying at first. I isolated the audio on my computer and played it over and over. After a few listens, I caught a phrase repeated softly. "Don't open the door." I listened again to confirm. Yes, it was clear. Something was whispering, "Don't open the door." The tone was urgent but quiet. My stomach tightened. I felt sweat on my forehead. I had no idea what to think. There was a warning hidden in that recording, several voices overlapping. It was nothing I'd heard with my own ears the night before. My first thought was that I was dealing with a prank. Maybe someone hacked the intercom system. Maybe it was someone in the building playing a joke. I tried to think logically, but I couldn't ignore the feeling that something was wrong. The building was old, with outdated wiring and a simple intercom system. I didn't even know how someone would hack it. And why would they? Most of my neighbors were older folks. I kept to myself and rarely interacted with them. I didn't report it to Julio right away. I just went about my day, trying to distract myself. I went to work, stayed busy, tried not to think about it. But by the time I got home that evening, I felt uneasy. I walked through the lobby, and everything looked normal. The hallway on my floor was quiet. My door was locked as I'd left it. Inside, I checked the intercom panel again. Everything looked normal. I ate a quick meal and watched TV with the volume low. Around midnight, I turned off the lights and stayed in bed, waiting. I didn't want to sleep. I just stared at the ceiling and listened. It happened again at around 2:30. The same buzz. I jumped out of bed and grabbed my phone. This time, I pressed the intercom button and said nothing. I heard my name repeated. I recorded the audio again. My skin prickled as I listened to the voice. It sounded closer somehow, more present. I checked the camera monitor. The entrance was empty. I felt my hand shaking slightly. I left the intercom on without saying anything. After a while, the voice stopped. I released the button and stood there in the dark living room, feeling my heart pound. I didn't sleep at all that night. Next morning, I listened to the new recording. It was similar, but the whispering was easier to distinguish. It sounded like several voices whispering underneath the main voice that said my name. The whispers repeated the same phrase. "Don't open the door." I listened carefully to see if there were more words, but I couldn't make anything else out. I played it again and again, trying to pick up any other clue. Nothing else. Just that warning repeated many times, layered under the main voice. I felt a strong urge to leave the apartment. I considered staying at a hotel, but I didn't want to abandon my place for something that might be a simple prank. Instead, I decided to confront Julio again. I went downstairs in the afternoon and found Julio inside his small office near the mailboxes. I told him I'd been getting strange calls at night. He shrugged and said he hadn't noticed anything. I asked if anyone else complained. He said no. I asked if the security camera recorded anything during those hours. He said the cameras only record on motion and the one at the entrance hadn't picked up anyone standing there. I asked him to check anyway. He sighed and checked the system. Nothing. Just empty frames of the entrance. He seemed annoyed with my questions. I didn't push it. I thanked him and left. He looked at me like I was making things up. I decided to investigate on my own. That night, I waited in the lobby from midnight until around 1:30. I sat on a small bench near the door, scrolling on my phone. The lobby was quiet. The street outside was also quiet. Eventually, I grew tired and went back upstairs, feeling a bit foolish. Maybe it wouldn't happen if I was watching. Maybe it only happened when I was inside my apartment. I locked my door and stood in front of the intercom. I didn't turn off the lights. I waited. Around 2, the buzzer sounded again. I rushed to the monitor and looked. Empty entrance. I pressed the intercom button and listened. The voice said my name, slow and steady. I recorded again, staying silent. After it stopped, I checked the time. 2:10 a.m. No one had come through the lobby just now. I knew that because I had just been down there less than an hour ago, and no one was lingering outside. That morning, I reviewed the new recording. The whispers were still there. Still the same warning. I felt tension in my shoulders and neck. My mouth felt dry. I tried to ignore it and focus on facts. The intercom calls come around the same time every night. The camera shows no one. The voice knows my name. The hidden whispers warn me not to open the door. There are no other clues. There's no sign of forced entry. Nothing missing. No note slipped under my door. No strange smells or footsteps outside. Just these calls. I tried a new approach. I disconnected the intercom unit from the wall and took a look at the wiring. It's just a few colored wires plugged into old connectors. I'm not an electrician, so I couldn't make much sense of it. But I noticed everything looked old and dusty. There was some corrosion on the metal parts. I cleaned it a bit and reconnected it. I hoped maybe that would stop the calls. It didn't. That night, I considered not answering at all. But when the buzzer came, I couldn't help myself. I pressed the button and listened. The voice said my name. I whispered back, "Who are you?" No response, just my name again. I said, "What do you want?" No answer. The main voice faded for a moment, and I listened closely, trying to catch the whispers. I could almost hear them in real time, a faint sound underneath the static. "Don't open the door." My throat tightened. I let go of the button. The intercom went silent. I called a friend of mine the next day. His name is Ricardo. He's a practical guy, not easily spooked. I told him about the calls. He said it was probably someone messing with the wiring, maybe tapping into the system from another apartment. He suggested I knock on a few neighbors' doors and ask if they heard anything. I didn't want to bother anyone, but I had to try. I knocked on the door of the apartment across from mine. A woman in her 50s answered. She said she never heard anything. I tried the apartment next to hers. A man in his 60s said no, he hadn't heard strange calls. Everyone was either annoyed or confused. No one had experienced the same thing. I stopped asking. It made me feel more isolated. I called an electrician to check the intercom. He came in the late afternoon. He looked at the wiring and said everything was normal, just old. He tested the line and said it worked fine. I asked if anyone could call my apartment from outside without being seen. He said not without pressing the button at the entrance panel. If someone pressed that button, the camera would show them unless they stood off to the side, but even then, some part of them would appear. The electrician left, and I sat alone in my apartment, staring at the intercom, feeling no closer to understanding this. The next night I tried to ignore it. I turned up the TV volume, wore headphones, tried to stay awake watching random shows. But around 2 in the morning, the buzzer cut through all the noise. I turned off the TV and listened. My heart was beating fast and I felt sweat under my arms. I considered not answering, just letting it ring, but the noise wouldn't stop until I pressed the button. I pressed it. The voice said my name. I tried something different. I said, "I won't open the door." The voice went silent for a second. I heard static. Then it said my name again, quieter. I listened for the whispers. This time they sounded louder. "Don't open the door," repeated over and over, overlapping like several people speaking from a distance. I felt my hands shaking. I released the button. The line went dead. I didn't sleep. I just sat in my living room, lights on, listening to the silence. I checked the hallway through the peephole. Nothing. I checked my locks. Everything was secure. The building was silent. The street outside was silent. I felt hungry but didn't want to eat. I didn't trust the silence. I replayed the recording several times, listening with headphones, trying to identify the voices. They sounded like men and women, different ages, maybe neighbors, maybe strangers. I couldn't tell. They only repeated that one phrase. The main voice that said my name was always the same. It sounded genderless, distorted, like filtered through cloth or a heavy scarf. I tried calling Ricardo again, but it was too late in the night. He wouldn't pick up. I sat there waiting for the sun to rise. The faint light of dawn made me feel a bit calmer. I decided not to leave. I decided not to open the door for anyone. If someone buzzed, I wouldn't open. If I heard footsteps, I wouldn't open. If anyone knocked, I would stay quiet. I didn't know what else to do, but I knew I had to follow that warning. Whatever was happening, the only clear message I had was to keep my door closed. The next few nights, the calls kept coming. Every time the buzzer rang, I recorded the calls. The voice kept saying my name. The whispers kept warning me not to open the door. I never answered the voice's questions because it asked none. I never gave it what it wanted because I didn't know what it wanted. I never opened the door. Sometimes the buzzing happened twice in the same night. Sometimes just once. Each time, I watched the monitor. Each time, I saw no one outside. I tried ignoring the calls for a whole night. I let the buzzer ring for a long time until it stopped on its own. Then it would start again 15 minutes later. I had no choice. I had to answer to stop the noise. I became exhausted. I fell asleep during the day and stayed awake at night. After about a week of this, my eyes were red, my hands trembled, and I felt weak. But I kept the door closed and locked. I don't know who is calling me. I don't know how they got my name. I don't know how they hide from the camera. I don't know where the whispers come from or why they warn me every night. But I know what I must do. Not open the door. I stay inside, waiting for morning. I keep my recordings backed up on my computer. I have them labeled by date, each file containing that voice saying my name and those whispers repeating that warning. I don't show them to anyone. I don't know who to trust. For now, I just wait. The building remains old and quiet. The neighbors remain unaware. The electrician found nothing. Julio thinks I'm making it up. My friends wouldn't believe it either. And I don't have proof beyond those recordings. All I can do is stay in my apartment and refuse to open the door. I don't know how long I can keep this up, but I have no choice. The voice calls for me every night and the whispers never change their message. They tell me not to open the door, so I won't. It all started the first night I settled into the new apartment. The place was furnished, the rent was low, and the landlord didn't ask many questions. That should have been my first warning. The building looked normal enough from the outside. Red brick walls, old windows, a narrow lobby with cheap tiles. Inside, Everything felt quiet, almost too quiet. I remember dropping my suitcase on the living room floor and standing there listening. No sound. No traffic noise, no footsteps, no television, just a low buzz from the kitchen's old fridge. It felt strange, but I tried to push that feeling aside. I walked through the apartment, checking each room. The living room had a small couch, a coffee table with a few scratches, a TV that looked older than me, and a rug that smelled a bit like dust and old wood. The bedroom had a narrow bed, a tall dresser, and a closet with a wooden door that creaked. The bathroom was small and smelled like cleaning products. The kitchen had a tiny dining table, some chipped plates in the cupboard, and a fridge that hummed all night. I remember that on my second day there, I opened the freezer to see if there was any leftover ice cream from the previous tenant. Instead, I found a crumpled photo stuck behind a frozen package of peas. I pulled it out, straightened it against my knee, and saw it showed 3 adults standing in front of a gray building. Their faces looked tired and serious. I didn't recognize them. I placed the photo on the kitchen counter. I couldn't figure out why someone would hide a photo in the freezer. It made no sense, and it made me uneasy. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought I heard something in the hallway outside my door. It sounded like someone walking very slowly. I got up and looked through the peephole. Nothing. The corridor was dark and empty. I told myself that it must have been the old pipes or something like that, but I still felt tense. I turned off the lights and listened. I heard my own heartbeat and the distant hum of the fridge. Eventually, I fell asleep. The next day, I decided to do a deeper check of the apartment. I wanted to understand what kind of person would hide a photo in the freezer. I looked inside cabinets, behind the couch, under the bed. I found nothing unusual, just old dust, some forgotten receipts, and a single sock rolled up behind the couch leg. In the bathroom, I opened the medicine cabinet and saw a few old bandages and half an empty bottle of aspirin. Everything felt normal until I reached the living room floor. I noticed that one of the floorboards near the window looked slightly different. Its surface was uneven, and the corner lifted a bit when I pressed it. I got a flathead screwdriver from my toolbox and pried it up. Underneath, I found a stack of letters wrapped in a plastic bag. The ink on the envelopes had smudged a bit, but I could still read the name. Brian H. I opened one of the letters and skimmed it. It talked about someone following him. It mentioned feeling watched even inside his own apartment. It said he had no idea who was doing it or why. Each letter carried the same sense of paranoia. Whoever Brian was, he had been afraid, hiding his letters under the floor. Why? I set the letters on the coffee table and stood up. I felt the hairs on my neck stand up. My stomach felt tight. I went to the window and looked outside. The street was empty. A few parked cars, a flickering streetlight. I waited, not sure what I expected. Maybe someone looking up at me from the sidewalk or a figure behind a curtain across the street. But I saw nothing. I tried to calm down, telling myself it was just old tenant stuff. Maybe Brian moved out in a hurry and forgot these letters. But why hide them? I decided to talk to the landlord. He was a quiet man who lived on the ground floor. When I asked him about the previous tenant, he shrugged and said he didn't remember much. He said the guy moved out suddenly and never came back for his security deposit. I pressed for more details. The landlord hesitated, then admitted the tenant had disappeared without notice. He hadn't even returned the keys. The landlord had to change the locks. I asked if the tenant's name was Brian H. He looked at me with a puzzled expression and said yes. He thought that might have been the name. I went back upstairs and locked my door. The apartment felt different now. I looked at the furniture and wondered what else might be hidden. I opened the dresser in the bedroom and checked behind the drawers. I found nothing unusual there. I looked under the bed. Only dust and a crushed soda can. In the closet, I pushed aside hangers and felt along the back wall. Smooth wood. I closed everything and sat on the couch. Around 10 p.m., I turned off the TV and got ready for bed. That night, I heard something again. This time, it sounded like breathing, very faint, as if someone stood just outside the window. I rolled out of bed and crept to the window, trying not to make noise. I peeked through the blinds. The street looked normal. No one stood there. I listened again. The sound stopped. My heart was racing, and my throat felt dry. I tried to tell myself it was just my imagination. The next morning, I decided to read all the letters. They all belonged to Brian H. He wrote them to someone named Jeff. There were about 8 letters in total. The handwriting was shaky. He wrote about strange objects he found in the apartment. He wrote about a set of keys hidden inside the couch cushion, about photographs in strange places, about footsteps in the hallway at night. He said he felt like someone was watching him from outside, and sometimes from inside the building. One letter mentioned the landlord, saying he was a strange man who never made eye contact. Another letter mentioned neighbors who stared at him. Brian wrote that he tried talking to them, but they denied hearing anything. He sounded desperate and isolated. The last letter ended abruptly, saying he was going to leave and would not come back. I felt like I'd stepped into someone else's nightmare. I put the letters back in the plastic bag and hid them in the closet. I thought about leaving, but I had paid the first month's rent and didn't have enough money to move again right away. Besides, I told myself there might be a rational explanation. Maybe Brian had mental health problems. Maybe he imagined it all. I tried to forget it and get on with my life. That evening I was watching TV when I saw something from the corner of my eye. The door handle to the bedroom seemed to move. It was a slight motion, a small click, as if someone tried to open it from the other side. I paused the TV and listened. My own breathing sounded too loud. I walked slowly to the bedroom door and grabbed the handle. It was locked. I hadn't locked it though, I always left it unlocked. I turned the handle and opened the door. The room was empty. The window was closed. Nothing was out of place. I checked under the bed again. Still just dust. I had trouble sleeping that night. I felt too warm, and my muscles were tense. Around 2 a.m., I heard a faint tapping sound from above the ceiling. I knew there were no apartments above mine, just the roof. The tapping continued for about a minute and then stopped. I lay there, eyes open, staring at the dark ceiling. My heart thumped, and my hands felt sweaty. I wiped them on the blanket. The next day, I tried talking to a neighbor. I met a guy from down the hall, a tall man wearing paint-stained jeans. I asked him if he knew anything about Brian. He shrugged and said he remembered Brian as a quiet guy who kept to himself. I asked if Brian had said anything about feeling watched. The neighbor frowned and said he never talked to Brian, just saw him coming and going sometimes. I asked if he ever heard strange sounds at night. He shook his head and said the building was old, that's all. Pipes and wood. I thanked him and went back inside. I started checking every inch of the apartment, trying to find more objects. I pried up a few more floorboards and found nothing. I opened the back of the TV stand. Dust and old cables. I checked the kitchen cabinets carefully. Under the sink, I found a small metal box with a lock. I tried opening it with a kitchen knife. The lock was flimsy and popped open easily. Inside, there was a wallet with a driver's license, credit cards, and a folded note. The license said Brian H. The photo showed a thin-faced man with tired eyes. He didn't look dangerous. The credit cards were expired. The folded note said, "If someone finds this, please understand that I tried leaving, but I can't. Someone is always watching. Check the hallway mirror." There was a mirror in the hallway outside my door, mounted on the wall. It was a simple rectangular mirror. I went out and stood in front of it. I touched its edges, trying to see if it moved. It was held by 2 screws. I went back inside and grabbed my screwdriver. Then I unscrewed the mirror from the hallway wall. Behind it, I found a small hole. Inside that hole, I found another envelope. It contained a single piece of paper with a short message. "They come at night. Don't make noise." I felt cold. My hands shook. I quickly put everything back and retreated into my apartment. I locked the door and pushed the dresser in front of it. I felt silly, but I didn't care. I just wanted to feel safer. I turned on all the lights and sat on the couch. The silence pressed in around me. My knees felt weak and my stomach churned. I waited like that for hours. Eventually, I got up and went to the window, looking outside again. The street was empty except for a few cars. A light was on in a window across the street. I saw a silhouette move behind that window. It was a person, but I couldn't make out features. They stood still after a moment, facing my direction. My heart beat faster. I stood there, not moving. After a while, the silhouette moved away. I told myself it was just a neighbor. That's normal. People move in their apartments, they look out windows, it doesn't mean anything. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being observed. The next few days I tried to ignore it all. I went to work, came back, watched TV, ate dinner. But at night I still heard strange sounds. Sometimes it sounded like scraping on the walls. Other times like soft whispering. I tried to record these sounds on my phone, but when I played the recordings back, I only heard static and the hum of the fridge. I wanted to get rid of the letters, the wallet, the note. They felt like evidence of something I didn't want to be part of. I took them and put them in a plastic bag, planning to throw them in the dumpster outside. I put on my jacket and slipped into the hallway. As I passed the mirror again, I stopped and listened. Nothing. No sounds. I went downstairs and out the front door. The street was quiet. I walked to the dumpster and tossed the bag inside. Then I stood there, feeling the cool air on my face. I looked up at my apartment window. I saw no movement. Everything looked normal. That night I slept a bit better, but around 3 a.m. I woke up suddenly. It felt like someone was tapping on my window glass from outside. I sat up, breathing hard, and listened. The tapping repeated, 3 short taps. My window was on the second floor facing the street. I went to the window and lifted the blinds. Nothing was there. No ladder, no balcony, just empty air. I felt dizzy and my legs shook. I backed away and tried to calm myself down. Maybe it was a branch from a nearby tree, but there were no trees close enough. I closed the blinds and crawled back into bed, pulling the blankets up to my chin. I could smell my own sweat. In the morning, I decided I would leave. I didn't care about the rent or my belongings, I could always replace them. I packed a bag with my clothes and toiletries. I grabbed my suitcase and headed for the door. When I opened it, I paused. The hallway smelled like old paint. The mirror was back on the wall. I had never put it back. The screws were back in place. I touched it. Solid. No sign of the hole behind it. My heart pounded and I hurried downstairs. The landlord's door was closed. I didn't bother knocking. I left the building, rolled my suitcase down the sidewalk, and didn't look back. I felt the tension leaving my shoulders as I walked away. I didn't know what happened to Brian H. I didn't know who was watching. I only knew I wanted nothing more to do with that apartment. I just kept walking until I reached a busier street. I stopped at a coffee shop, sat down, and tried to calm my breathing. I never went back to that apartment. I never found out what really happened. I told a friend about it, and he said I should call the police or something like that. But I didn't. I just moved on, found another place, and tried to forget. Still, every so often, late at night, I feel that same prickling sensation on the back of my neck, like someone's eyes are on me. I try to ignore it. It might be nothing. But I remember the letters, the photo in the freezer, the wallet hidden under the sink, the whispering sounds at night. I remember feeling trapped in that apartment, and I remember leaving it behind without looking back. That's all I need to know. I'm done with that place. I arrived at Mark's place just after dark. He had invited me to stay over for a few days. I knew him from college, and although we weren't best friends, we got along well enough. He lived alone in a large old house about an hour outside the city. He had mentioned it once or twice before, always brushing off details. He said it was a family property and that he moved in when his parents went abroad, but he never gave me a full explanation. I didn't really care. I just needed a quiet place to stay for a short while after dealing with some stressful problems at work. Inside, the house smelled like dust and wood. The floors creaked. The ceiling was high, and most of the furniture looked heavy and worn. The front hallway had a tall wooden coat rack and a faded rug. Mark guided me into the living room. He offered me a beer. We sat on an old couch that sank in a bit too much. The TV was off. A dim lamp on a small table lit the area. Outside I could hear crickets, maybe some distant wind, but nothing else. It felt isolated and quiet. That was fine. I didn't want noise. After a short while, Mark told me there was a guest room upstairs. He gave me a quick warning not to wander around too much, especially not to open the locked door at the end of the upstairs hallway. I asked him what was behind it. He said it was a storage room that he never used. He said the lock was stuck, and he hadn't bothered calling anyone to fix it because he never needed anything from inside. I asked him why he would warn me about it if it was just a useless room. He shrugged and said that in the past, friends who stayed over got curious and tried to open it. He didn't want any problems or damage to the door. I thought it was strange, but I nodded and dropped it. I wasn't in the mood for an argument. As I climbed the stairs to the guest room, I saw the door he meant. It was at the very end of a narrow hallway. The door looked old, the paint chipped, the handle and lock rusty. It was quiet up there. I pushed open the guest room door, turned on the light, and placed my bag on the bed. The room smelled faintly of old linen. There was a small dresser, a simple lamp, and one window overlooking the dark backyard. I sat on the bed, tested the mattress with my hand, and decided it was fine for a few nights. I washed up in the bathroom down the hall. The sink's faucet squeaked, and the mirror above it was stained around the edges. But everything worked. I could hear Mark moving around downstairs. He turned off lights, I think. After I finished, I went back to my room and closed the door. I lay on the bed and tried to relax. The drive had tired me out, and I hoped to sleep well. In the middle of the night, I woke up. I'm not sure why. Maybe it was the silence or maybe some slight sound. I listened carefully. I heard a faint noise coming from the end of the hallway. It sounded like something heavy sliding across the floor. It was not constant. It stopped and started again after a few seconds. The floor in that area creaked a bit. I wondered if Mark was up moving furniture or looking for something. It didn't make sense at that hour, but I had no other explanation. I got out of bed quietly. I walked to the door of my room and pressed my ear against it. I heard low, muffled whispers. I couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman. It sounded like someone speaking softly but urgently. I couldn't catch any words. It stopped after a few moments, followed by what sounded like a piece of furniture scraping against the floor again. I decided to check if Mark was awake. I opened my door and stepped into the hallway. The light was off and I had to let my eyes adjust. The hallway was narrow and dark. The only light came from a street lamp outside, spilling a weak glow through a small window at the other end of the hall. I walked slowly toward the locked door. My heart started beating faster. I felt the hairs on my arms stand up. I held my breath for a second and listened. More whispers. They stopped when I got close. I leaned forward and touched the door. It felt cold. I bent down a bit and looked at the thin gap under it. Nothing visible there. Then I leaned to the side, trying to see if there was any gap in the door frame. There was a tiny crack in the wood near the handle. Through that crack, I could see a small bit of movement inside. It looked like a shadow shifting. Then, very clearly, I saw an eye looking back at me through that gap. I pulled back, startled. My heart thumped hard. I swallowed and stood still, trying not to make noise. That eye was definitely not my imagination. It blinked once, slowly, and then moved away. I whispered, "Hello?" I didn't get a response. I just heard soft breathing. I considered knocking, but I didn't. I was afraid. I didn't know who was in there. Mark said that no one used that room, that the door was locked. Yet someone was inside. I took a step back and turned toward the stairs. I wanted to get Mark. Before I could move any further, the whispers started up again, louder this time, but still muffled. I couldn't understand what they said. I hurried downstairs. The steps creaked under my feet. The living room was dark now. I saw a soft glow from the kitchen. I found Mark sitting at the small kitchen table with a single light on. He wore an old robe and had a mug of something hot in front of him. He looked at me with a tired expression. I told him what I heard and what I saw. He frowned. He said I must have been dreaming. I told him I was wide awake and that I clearly saw an eye through the crack in the door. He shook his head. He said that was impossible. He said no one had used that room in years. It was locked, and he had no key. He said maybe I saw a reflection or maybe a shadow. I insisted that it was a real eye. He sighed and said that I should just ignore it. He said the house was old, and old houses made strange noises. I didn't believe him, but he wasn't showing any surprise or concern. He just looked annoyed. I felt a chill run through me. I asked him to come upstairs with me to check. He refused. He said it was late, that I should go back to bed, and that we would talk in the morning. I didn't like that answer, but I was tired and I didn't want to argue. I went back upstairs, feeling uneasy. In the hallway, everything was quiet again. I stood in front of the door, listening. Nothing. No whispers, no footsteps, no breathing. I checked the gap again. Darkness. I couldn't see any eye. Just an empty darkness. I went into my room and locked the door. I didn't sleep well. I kept waking up, listening for sounds. Occasionally I thought I heard faint scraping noises like a chair being moved, but I wasn't sure if it was real or my imagination. At some point I fell asleep. In the morning, I woke up and went downstairs. Mark was in the living room reading something on his phone. I asked him about the night before. I wanted a straight answer. He just shrugged. I pressed him. I said I heard whispers and saw someone's eye. He shook his head and said he hadn't heard anything. He said maybe I was tired from the trip. I got angry and said I knew what I saw. He didn't yell back. He just repeated that it was an old house and maybe I saw a trick of the light. I looked at his face carefully. He looked calm, but his eyes seemed distant, like he wasn't interested in talking about it. I knew he was hiding something. I decided to spend the afternoon looking around the house. I stayed downstairs at first. The living room, kitchen, dining room, and a small office were all normal. There were old family photos on the walls, a few dusty shelves, and some boxes in the corner of the dining room. I didn't see anything unusual. Outside, the yard was large and partly overgrown. There was a tool shed in the back locked up. The air smelled like damp earth. The day was gray, no sun. I didn't go far. I didn't have a reason to explore the yard, and I wasn't trying to pry too much. I just wanted to understand what was going on inside the house. By late afternoon, Mark said he had some errands to run. He left in his car, telling me he'd be back in a few hours. I took that opportunity to check the upstairs more carefully. I walked up the stairs and stopped in front of the locked door. I ran my hand over the frame. The wood was rough. I pulled on the handle. It rattled but wouldn't budge. I put my ear to the door and listened for any sign of movement inside. Silence. I crouched down and looked through the gap again. Dark and empty. I whispered, "Is anyone in there?" Nothing. I tried pressing my shoulder against the door, hoping maybe the lock would give. It didn't move. I looked around for a key. I searched the guest room drawers, the bathroom, the hallway closet. I found nothing. I thought about looking in Mark's bedroom, but that felt like a line I shouldn't cross. Still, I was tempted. I knew something strange was happening, and I wanted answers. In the end, I left Mark's room alone. I waited and listened. After a while, I went back downstairs, feeling frustrated. In the evening, Mark returned. He acted normal, asked if I wanted to order takeout. We ate pizza in the living room. I brought up the door again and he sighed. He said he didn't want to talk about it anymore. He said there was nothing behind that door, just old junk, and that I should respect his wishes and drop the subject. His tone was calm but firm. I decided not to push it. I nodded and focused on my food. Later that night, I tried to sleep again. I kept the hallway light off. It was quiet for a few hours. I almost drifted off, but then I heard it again. The scraping sounds, The whispers. I sat up in bed, heart beating faster. I got out of bed and opened my door, stepping into the dark hallway. I walked slowly toward the locked door. I could feel my pulse in my ears. The whispers were there, low and constant. I bent down to look through the gap again. This time I saw more than just an eye. I saw a shape moving. It looked like a person's face, but I couldn't make out details. Just an eye and part of a cheek. The face pulled back, leaving just darkness. I tried to speak quietly. "Who are you? Why are you in there?" I heard only hushed breathing. Then I heard something heavy scraping along the floor again, like a table or a chair being dragged. The sound was slow and deliberate. I tried the door handle again, pushing harder. The door rattled. I heard footsteps inside, soft and slow. They moved away from the door, then came back closer. I said, "I know you're in there." No response. I decided to wake Mark up. I didn't care if he got annoyed. I went to his room and knocked. No answer. I knocked again, louder. After a few seconds, he opened the door. He looked tired and irritated. I whispered that there was someone in that room right now, moving things around. He told me to go back to sleep. I insisted. I said I could hear whispers and footsteps. He said I should stop imagining things. He said this wasn't funny. I grabbed his arm and tried to pull him into the hallway. He resisted at first, but then he followed me. We stood in front of the locked door. I said, "Listen." He stood there, arms crossed, not even leaning in. After a few moments of silence, he said he didn't hear anything and that I should stop. He turned around and walked back into his room, closing the door behind him. I felt angry and confused. I knew what I heard. I knew what I saw. I stood there in the dark, breathing fast. I tried one last time to talk to whoever was inside. "I know you're there," I said quietly. I heard nothing. I waited a few more minutes, then gave up and went back to my room. I couldn't sleep. I lay on the bed with my eyes open, listening. At some point I must have dozed off because when I opened my eyes again, it was morning. The house was quiet. I got dressed and went downstairs. Mark was in the kitchen making coffee. He acted normal. I grabbed a mug and poured some coffee, drank it black. He asked if I slept better. I said no. He didn't respond. We stood there in silence. I decided I would leave that day. I told Mark I needed to get back to the city. He didn't argue. He said he understood. He didn't mention the door or the noises. He didn't say anything about the strange events. I packed my bag and carried it downstairs. Before I left, I looked at him and said, "I know there's someone in that room." He looked at me without blinking and said, "I told you there isn't." He didn't elaborate, he just stared at me with a flat expression. I left the house and got in my car. As I pulled away, I looked up at the second floor window. I thought I saw a curtain move, but maybe that was just a breeze. I drove away, feeling uneasy and confused. I never got an explanation. I never found out who was behind that door or why. But I know what I saw and what I heard. Someone was in that locked room. Someone watched me through the crack in the door. Someone moved furniture around and whispered at night. Mark never admitted it, and I guess I'll never know the truth. But I'm sure it happened. I'm sure I saw that eye.